Because I'm running for the presidency. I'm here because I'm personally tired of seeing this great country of ours being ripped off.
But as far as Trump is concerned, our allies are only part of the problem. The real culprit is Iran.
Why couldn't we go in and take over some of their oil, which is along the sea?
How would you do that? Would you send in the Marines? Would you take a chance in a war?
Let them have Iran. You take their oil. That's what
How?
How?
I mean, do we want a war? What do you mean we take their oil?
You go in. You're
How do we go in?
You're going to have a war by being weak.
Okay, how do we go in? What do we do?
Excuse me. Yeah? You're going to have a war, and it's going to start in the Middle East.
What if the Soviet Union said, you do this to Iran, we're going to come in?
I don't believe they'd do it. The next time Iran attacks this country, go in and grab one of their big oil installations, and I mean grab it and keep it, and get back your losses, because this country has lost plenty because of Iran.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Monday, March 30th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. I'm sure you've all seen that clip going around. What you may not know is that was posted by Trump, which was today, after it was posted yesterday by somebody who called him out. And I find the timing very interesting of that, with no comment, posted on True Social, the exact clip you just saw. So I don't think that cut was somehow us editing that a certain way. It's exactly what they posted. Very interesting, isn't it? We'll touch on that to start today. But the main thing that we're going to talk about today is something that I thought needed a focus. A study that was shared with me that is, or rather an article discussing research that's shared about a field of research that I'm very concerned about. It makes me uncomfortable, like the direction it's going in, especially with the way the world is today and the seemingly increasing inability of the average person to see even the most basic of things our government are involved in today. And that has to do with what's called longevity research or life extension research. Now, this is something that's gotten very prominent, but in the same way, almost more quiet as that's happening. And I don't mean quiet in the sense that it's not being pointed to. It's in corporate media, but it's just not being discussed. It's not being, and I think there's a very clear effort to make sure that's the way this goes. So you get the controlled people in the media, the people in and I mean controlled just in the sense of sort of influenced or controlled, but mainstream alternative, government, and ultimately just never really engage with this in an earnest way. And this point is really, to cut to the chase of the article, about basically growing human bodies, one for the use of organs for rich people who, like, right out of every dystopian movie we could talk about, and then even to the point of creating full human bodies without brains for the potential of that same purpose, but then maybe even being able to put your brain into a new body. Now, this is stuff that's this is ongoing research. And even just saying it out loud, I guarantee there's somebody who's hearing this going, that's just crazy, conspiracy theory. Not only is the research real, not only is the direction very, very highly funded and with very, very influential and adamant people about this topic, it's very real and it is happening. The research has gone in a way, I don't want to say dark, but it's gone to a location where there's really no oversight. And at least in the category that I'm going to discuss today. My concern is not just the whole category of that work worries me about what it's going toward, who's involved with it, and what it almost always leads to when, anything like that when developed. But the focal point specifically of how that problem overlaps, the overlap between that problem and what I see as a very clear engineered transition, and the, I guess, overlap between the people involved in that transition and what they want for the world and what they're driving and the wars that they're currently conducting, and the overlap with them and this alarming research and what they may see that used for. And it just really worries me where this all goes. Now, I'm trying to make it as sort of, just general as possible, just to keep it important not to be flavored by other things. I mean, you know what I've talked about. When it comes to the idea of the network state agenda, about Prospera in particular. And I think it's a concerning reality. Not to say that there's there's probably people that are doing things there that you might find important, that maybe they have the best of intentions for. It's about the larger over the umbrella of influence over all of it, and what I think it's, in my opinion, doing and plans to do to the world in a governance sense, as well as a lot of, very weird scientific experimentation that's being publicly discussed in certain ways that is happening. Many Circle is one that's very public, and this gets into the realm of the genetic manipulation, as well as the kind of stuff we've talked about in the past that overlaps with the gain of function category. And it's interesting that the group that can be, the primary group anyway, that can be so adamant about why that is a problem is predominantly involved with the group that now seems to be leaning into that aggressively from a private perspective, which is way, way worse ultimately, in my opinion. But a lot to get to in this conversation today. And I think we're going to start with some updates that I just wanted you to see. I waffled on whether I was going to include them, but I do think it's important with what's going on in the world for you to see the quick updates on what's going on with some points I wanted you to see about Iran. Hopefully do that very quickly, and then we'll get right into the main point today, which is about that overlapping connection and, where I see this going and where that dovetails with 5G, 6G, what that may also add to. And, these are things, whether or not I don't even want to say believe, because it's fundamentally obvious. You can see that these things are being worked on, but whether or not you are concerned about them or not, it's important to understand from a very core level of this that these things are inherently, in many ways, inherently dangerous. Take 5G, for example. This is very clearly, as far as I can tell, basically not even truly studied from a government perspective about the dangers that we all know are there. I'll cite Derek's excellent research on that toward the end. And how we know that. And I mean, know that. Sort of like fluoride and the rest. Not the crazy game we play where we can all know the evidence and yet we still have to battle with these ridiculous partisan or government people that just yell that we don't know, or you're taking the wrong side's narrative, or you're on the left or the right, or it's Iran. Even though it's all there, we can see it. Right? Fluoride's bad for you. Our own government's basically telling us that today, but the current administration doesn't care. Glyphosate's killing you. COVID-19, go down the list. We know these things, and I don't see that lightly. My point is that we know that these technologies, where they started from military technology, are hurting people, and that's undeniable. And we just been shoved right into the 6G level with Donald Trump. We need to see that these things have their own inherent danger. Then on top of that, what that will lead to. So, two quick things before we go back to the clip from Donald Trump, just because I find that interesting to talk about. I noticed this from yesterday very quickly, for those that have tuned in. This, as always, even with a platform like this that we know very well has censored aggressively throughout the years and still does, could just be a glitch, right? But I found it interesting yesterday with the focal point, which I'll point to this show at the end today as it relates to the connection, about as the title, Trump releases White House app with dangerous spyware, and Israel's spyware's quiet comeback under Trump. Now, this was, if you have not watched this show, this is incredible. Absolutely unreal what they're doing. And again, maybe they don't even know what's happening. Maybe somebody did this through them, and Trump's administration is not even aware that they I shouldn't even say basically, released an app that is spyware. And then what I did is I went through and showed you the, undeniable overlap of Israeli spyware companies like Paragon Solutions, NSO Group, Pegasus, kind of the same conversation, and overlap with U.S. spyware and technology. Two of them, AEI and Red Lattice, are groups that are a U.S. Virginia-based company that blended together with the NSO Group elements, or rather, Paragon Solutions specifically, and now it operates out of Israel still, but is considered a U.S. company. And this is my point, though, is that you could argue that these things are the same. Either way, what this app was incredibly alarming and invasive, and is spying on you every second, is using your phone to access your storage, things that'll blow your mind that they're not even addressing as far as I can tell. The point was, I did this show, and as of right now, YouTube is acting like I haven't even gone live, even though it was live. I double-checked with multiple people. It was streaming on there. As you can see, it just says waiting for this platform to start streaming. So I guess they just removed it, or it was a glitch. The only reason I don't think it was a glitch is because, interestingly enough, and I want to be clear, it did stream on both these platforms and everywhere else, and I can prove that right now, is that it's also like that on BitChute, which I find frustrating. It's the same thing, acting as if I didn't go live, and I did. Now, I guess it's possible a glitch from you StreamYard to stream to all of them simultaneously, and it went to everyone else, and these two, because it did stream but didn't show up, makes you wonder what's going on. Could just be a multi-platform glitch for only these two out of all the rest that worked. I don't even think that makes sense technologically. But what I think is frustrating is it's happening on this topic in particular. But just consider, wanted to point out to you as always, I will note, by the way, that I will always support BitChute for the most part, as long as they uphold their mission of no censorship. And I believe and support the people that built this platform. I, however, have a very negative opinion right now of the person at the very top, the person who I was recently doing a podcast with, who kicked me off the show because he didn't agree with the opinions that I was stating. A platform that's supposed to be no censorship. And I got the same sentiments from people that work around him that that's what he was doing, even hinting at deleting comments, by the way. Came directly from one of the people they works with. All that to be aside, the point worries me that this may be what drives something like this. And I haven't commented on that, by the way. It's something that's not as important, but I was doing that show and ultimately made some comments about how Zionism is involved with what's going on, how technocracy or the idea of, these kind of deep state elements, rather just unelected power structures, very clearly are part of the conversation, and didn't like that apparently. And I brought it up again on the show, and then he just decided to kick me off, to the frustration of everybody else. Still have very, very, very serious respect for Bruce and Dennis, by the way, for those who know the show we're talking about. Anyway, the point was, though, that these are suddenly not being there, not played. I think that's worth noting. And I wonder whether we're getting more into the old style of censorship while we're dealing with the algorithmic manipulation. Now, to start back with the clip, this is probably not the first person that shared it, but it is somebody who shared it on March 29th. 4 million views, 2.4 million views, excuse me. Probably the first person, seeing as how much engagement it got. But this is somebody, Whiplash374, looks like 146,000 followers, says, "That's it, I give up. Donald Trump is a time traveler." Well, that's a weird way to frame it as a positive thing, seeing as how all you really have to note is this has always been his opinion. And the truth is he's been lying to you about that up until now. And now he's going back to doing what he always wanted to do. That's not, don't need to be a time traveler to work that little Gordian knot out. The reality is clearly he has always been the person. It's also another point to make to start. Like I keep saying, Trump did not change, guys. This narrative about, I don't even recognize him anymore, are people who either never really saw what he was or just don't admit that they were fooled. Because the truth is, and we were calling it out then, in the last administration. Yes, there's examples of things that have gotten crazier, or that I also think that Trump is sort of being cornered right now, whether it's a combination of him realizing he is in a way being played by outside forces, doesn't make him the good guy or not innocent, but he's realizing that to some degree. But my point is, I feel like he's cornered right now. His propaganda is catching up with him. And so that's what you're seeing, I think. He's sort of, I see him sort of as like a toddler having a tantrum right now and lashing out at everything around him. And it's not because I hate Trump and I'm a transgender. They're both Trump, Biden, left, right, all ridiculous. The point is that you have to acknowledge that who he is right now and what he's doing, as you can clearly see, is who he's always been, guys. And also, it's funny that Barbara Walters can't be like, you mean a very, very public and obvious war crime, which is what you're describing? Even then, you can't acknowledge just seizing the oil is not that's illegal, guys. The Geneva Conventions, it's always been illegal. Same thing it is now. My point is that they posted this on the 29th, and then Trump just posts it with no comment the next day. Now, that's not something that you should praise. That's a weak move to act like somehow you own, like this is, you're posting it like it's your thing. Now, the commentary becomes Trump posted this, not that somebody else posted it and he tried to post it to sort of hide the fact that was going around. I don't think he wants you to see this. But that's what you do. You own it. You scream the word loudly that you were insulted. You said something wrong that people hated you for, so you scream it aloud 17 more times. That's what Trump does every time. This is who he is. I think that's a sign of weakness. Either way, that's what he always thought. Guys, that's the real point. And I think that's very clear today. And guess what? He even doubled down on this very sentiment just yesterday with Financial Times. Donald Trump says U.S. could take the oil in Iran. It's just like perfect timing. And realize, here's what's funny about this. This is why that clip came out, because he said this yesterday. He posted that clip on his own Truth Social today. So it says Donald Trump, and so I guess you could argue if he wanted to point that out, he would have, right? Until after the fact. Donald Trump has said he wants to take the oil in Iran and could seize the export hub of Karg Island at the end as the U.S. sends thousands of troops to the Middle East. The U.S. president told the Financial Times in an interview on Sunday that his preference would be to take the oil. Like, you understand, like, I'm not saying you have to care about international law, but at least acknowledge that in other conversations and make sure you're consistent with your logic and don't gasp when you claim Iran violates international law, right? The point, though, is that if you do and you believe that it should in some way, guide or at least influence directions of governments around the world, well, then seizing the oil with no real justification outside of, there are legal pathways. In this case, in a legal war started with no justification, or even after warfare, the reality is you're not supposed to just seize the resources of another country because you can. Now, at today, what do Hegseth and all the rest tell you? We're powerful and we can. Well, you can agree with that. Again, but then don't gripe when you see another country doing that to you, which is what happens. They're not allowed to just take us and bomb us and do that. Well, you set the table. If you're going to act like you can do this, well, they can do it right back. Now it says, and I'm not advocating for that. I find that to be insanely stupid, but that's what, making sure we're consistent with our logic. But he says, my preference would be take the oil, comparing it to a move to Venezuela. Yeah, thank you, Donald Trump, for highlighting that you were also breaking the law with Venezuela, which anybody who's not a child will already acknowledge because that's what they've been doing their entire lives, where the U.S. intends to control the oil industry indefinitely. I mean, he just said that out loud. So that's in the interest of Venezuelans? Like, my point, like I've been saying over the last couple of weeks, they're not even trying anymore. They're not even trying. They yell democracy and then just put someone in place and just go forward. Is Delcy, was she elected by? Come on, guys. They put the person there that was amenable to their interest and even said, if she doesn't line up with the way we like, we'll pick somebody else. And yet they call that democracy. And I'm not joking. They literally say, democracy, we're saving the Venezuelan people while stealing their resources and controlling their government. It's insulting to our intelligence. Same thing, where the U.S. intends to control it indefinitely following its capture. He's saying that's what I want to do in Iran. Yes, thank you for admitting the crimes on the record, but it's not like the international community is going to do anything about it. Trump said, quote, to be honest with you, my favorite thing is to take the oil in Iran. But some stupid people back in the U.S. say, why are you doing that? But they're stupid people. He's got this like same mantra he does with every time okay, there's stupid people that say burning the flag is it's unconstitutional to make that illegal. Well, it is. It's been upheld countless times by the Supreme Court. But he said people that say that, they're stupid people. Well, no, they're actually correct people. And they're not stupid if they're correct. You're either lying or incorrect, but you call them stupid because you don't want that to be the case. Okay, he said, we need to shut down the internet with Bill Gates and a lot of they're doing bad things on the internet. Remember that, 2016? And he said, there's people will say, oh, free speech. Those are stupid people, or something like that. Stupid was one term. And so are they stupid? No, they're correct because that would be a free speech issue. But he said it because he's either lying or doesn't know he's wrong. And he keeps doing it. So in this case, they're stupid people for saying that you can't just illegally take the oil. You understand, in my opinion, they're not saying don't take it. They're saying don't do it like that. At least give you some kind of a legal framework. Such a move would involve seizing Karg Island which most of Iran's oil is exported. And it's this game they've been playing where that's sort of been floated, but not. And I can't tell whether it's a head fake, but it seems likely. Maybe we take Karg Island, he says. Maybe we don't. Oh, you're so crafty, Trump. We have a lot of options. It would also mean we had to be there in Karg Island for a while. He says, asked about the state of Iranian defense on Karg Island, he said, I don't think they have any defenses. We could take it very easily. Well, no, you really couldn't. You could probably take it, and then they would nonstop rain down missiles on you like Robert clearly outlined. And then you would call them terrorists, I guess, but you'd be seizing their territory. And I argue this is probably even likely it's going to happen. But that means he doesn't care about the interest of Americans or any other thing other than his, I guess, doing what Israel says he should do. I'm not even sure how he frames that. And same with everything else, as now he's floating potential attacks on desalination plants, which are crimes. We'll talk about that next. And like Robert already outlined for you, it's very clear. Iran has built themselves into a position where even if they attack one of their main locations, it barely affects the long-term feasibility of what they're doing or continuity. However, in reverse, most of the places where Iran can bomb can take out one location and basically destroy their ability to have fresh water, at least in a couple of main locations. And he did a great job breaking that down. But here he is telling you we're going to he's at least floating the idea. He could be trying to trick them. He says, quote, we've got about 3,000 targets left. We bombed 13,000 targets and another couple of thousand to go. Totally in the midst of negotiations, clearly. He said a deal could be made fairly quickly. I mean, the game that anyone is pretending like saying, you better hurry up and make a deal or we're going to bomb you is in any way negotiations. No, that's at the barrel of a gun. So let's just even say they go, fine, we'll make a deal. Well, you did it at the barrel of a gun. So it's not technically any kind of legal deal under any standard in the world. And it says, and again, so he's saying 13,000 targets. Well, who else told you this? Israel told you that. Last week, they said, we've got 4 weeks more of bombing planned out. Not to say it's going to end in 4 weeks. So, and they said, we're going to keep going. So clearly, whether Trump says one thing or the next day, he seems to constantly, no matter what he says, be on the track of whatever Israel's doing. So we can yell, we're going to do a peace deal tomorrow. Tankers this day, 10 over there. But then we come back, finally look back and think, oh, well, exactly the same time frame Israel said. The same bombing targets Israel pointed to. So either he doesn't know that he's on their track or he's just pretending like he's in charge while he's literally Maggie stealing real on The Simpsons. Last week, he said that Iran had permitted 10 Pakistan-flagged oil tankers to the Strait of Hormuz. Let's not forget, by all means, all accounts, GPS and otherwise, literally didn't happen. And yet we can't have an honest conversation about how he obviously lied about that, or he was misled, or somebody simply told Trump that they were going to, and then he just off the cuff said it happened already because that's what he's known for. I shouldn't even say known for. That's just the kind of stupidity that he does, or I guess is known for. But it continues, and the number of tankers had not been doubled. Last week, he said they permitted 10. The number of tankers had now been doubled to 20, he told him. And that's not actually true. Now, maybe he misquoted that to them, what he originally said and what Leavitt followed up with today, which appears to be nothing involving them, is that they did 20 more. So it's funny, it becomes total of 20 when what he said was 8 that became 10, that 8 plus 2, for whatever dumb reason he keeps saying that, and then later said they sent 20, not added 10 to the total. I mean, this is so ridiculous. The fact that we even have to like wade through this and try to make sense of it. Is anybody anywhere of the mind that this is an honest conversation? Now, it could turn out down the line that he's been working with somebody, but we know provably he's been lying about most of this. It says they gave us 10, he said. Now we're given 20, and the 20 have already started. They're going right up the middle of the strait. No, they're not, man. They're absolutely not. Now, the 20 we're going to get to, he pointed to, are a deal that Iran actually made, or rather just a conversation with Pakistan to do, I think it was 2 a day, up to 20. So you can literally prove what he's talking about is something that they're dealing with in regard to just letting ships through. Like I've been telling you, it's not closed. Take note of everybody who's been telling you that it has been heavily restricted by them and the U.S. and Israel screaming to the world that it's been closed, which has caused its own restrictions. But it has not been closed. They've been letting people through, as I've been showing you since the beginning. Many people just were afraid to try it. That's because of the U.S. and Israel threatening that they would do that for them, apparently, even though they did not say other than bombing the U.S. and Israel and enemies. And so in this case, they're going up the middle of the strait, he says. Well, that's not true, because what they were talking about was some over the process of days. So he just either lied about that or he didn't even know what was going on. Somebody relayed information to him and he just vomited it out thinking he knew what was going on. Trump added that Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf, Iran's parliamentary speaker and one of the country's top wartime leaders, had authorized the additional tankers. Yeah, that's the same guy that's literally saying, yeah, there's nothing happening. There's no negotiations. Trump's making this up. He's trying to fool you. He's been tweeting about it. Now, could he be lying? Of course. My thought originally was maybe they are making a deal and this guy's going, stop saying it, Trump. You're going to get me killed. I actually think it's more likely today he's trying to get him killed and he's not actually working with him. I think what we're dealing with, just a guess, but the way it's starting to feel to me is that they're literally, because remember, the Israeli Times of Israel said on the record that this is the guy Trump was speaking to. Israel said that. Before that, we only had insinuation from people online this was the guy, right? Well, now Trump added that Ghalibaf is the one who authorized the tankers. Okay, so now is that because Trump heard that from his people, or is that because Israel told him that? Now it started to look more and more like Trump is being played by everyone around him. And I don't think he's even capable of truly engaging with that. Think about that for a second, what that would mean for him. And on top of that, the point would be, though, that this, or I guess you could add that the idea is to get this person killed. Somebody who clearly seems to be influential and is important in the conversation. And they think they can just go, we made a deal with him and Iran's going to go kill him because they guess that's who they think these people are. No, they're not like you guys. That's the truth. They may be just as bad like all governments can be, but they have continually demonstrated that they don't do the kind of things that you do reflexively. Violence and belligerence with no justification. Look for yourselves. Don't listen to what the State Department says. Take a look. My point is they could have tried, hoping they would get that done, and it didn't work. Sounds like a half thought out Trump plan to me. Then it says, he's the one who authorized the ships to me, Trump says, to me. Every other account shows you that he didn't even speak to them. It says, remember, I said they're giving me a present, and everyone said, what's the president? BS. When they heard about that, they kept their mouth shut. Negotiations are going very well. He is just doubling down on this nonsense. The son is either dead or extremely bad shape. He keeps saying this. Is that the same guy you told us was dead? Now he's kind of dead maybe, or just in bad shape, or is he hiding somewhere? 30 seconds ago, you told us he was irrelevant and you were speaking with somebody entirely different. Then the next day, you presented that same group, him as the leader, with a 15-point plan that he denied. How many times can we not? I mean, he should be laughed at in front of people in these rooms, but yet you get these bootlicking following, how are you feeling today, Mr. Trump? What kind of shirt are you going to wear tomorrow? Like the dumbest kind of things. And that's actually a little bit over the top. They get questions that are engaged, but it's just like nonsensical. Like you could clearly ask questions that would completely dismantle what he's doing. They don't, because they'll never be welcome back into those rooms. Access journalism for you. Yeah, I was making sure that was the end. Yeah, so continuing. So remember, this is the guy on the 23rd who said no negotiations have been held. It's fake news used to manipulate the markets. And that's exactly what happened. Literally the same 5-day period that we predicted is exactly what happened. Not we, everybody. That wasn't even me. I was reporting on somebody else. I think it was James Lee who made that point. But as the independent media or just people on Twitter were like, what do you bet it's going to come down to that? And sure enough, well, here he is today. The United States of America is in a serious discussion with a new and more reasonable regime. Oh, okay. But it's still a regime, though. It's still an evil terrorist regime, but they're just a little bit less terrorist regime. Okay, got it. The word regime is supposed to be a derogatory thing. Maybe he doesn't know that. Either way, now we've gone from, we're dealing with a random guy that Trump is now literally telling us is Golubov, apparently. That's the guy who's giving you the tankers. This is from yesterday on Financial Times. Yesterday. He gave me 20 tankers, apparently. Okay, he denies that. Then for whatever reason, after the first 10, he makes an offer for a 15-point plan that the administration he just told you we're all dead, denied, okay? And then he said, they better get serious or we're all going to go to war. You just said you were about to make a deal, but now you're threatening them? I mean, it's impossibly embarrassing. And then after that, he comes back and says, now I'm dealing with a new regime, a new, more reasonable, responsible. Okay. Is this a third person? Is it the same government? Is he making it all up? Is he talking to Israel on different phones? Who knows? But this is just sad. Now, look, it may very well turn out that this is something that, he turned out to be the master deal maker and egg on our face, or however you want to look at it. Sure, possible. There's literally no reason to think that's the case. The evidence everywhere you look counters what he's doing. So it wouldn't have been smart to assume based on what he says, even though he lies all the time, even if it turns out to be correct. It's always the stance is always to stand with the facts in front of you, even if it turns out to go the other direction after more is added. So right now, there's nothing to indicate any of this, and every part other than his team has denied this. And it says, great progress has been made, but if for any reason a deal is not shortly reached, it will, which it probably will be, which no one's agreeing with, by the way, and if the strait is not immediately open for business, which it is, other than for you guys, we will conclude our lovely stay in Iran by blowing up and completely obliterating all of the electric generating plants, oil wells in Karg Island, and possibly all desalination plants. Jesus, good God, which we have purposely not yet touched. Yeah, because those would be crimes, Donald Trump, like everything else you're doing. So I guess it doesn't matter for him, right? But think about this. We're doing so great. And he talks in front of people. Oh, we're making a deal. They're giving me everything I asked for. They just love me. They said, here, take more oil, Trump, because we love you. We agree with you. And then 30 seconds later, you damn well better do it. We're going to blow up everything. Why would you even need to say that if what you just said was true before that? See, I feel like I'm wasting breath even going through that. Does anybody not see that? I mean, seriously, it's a real question, because I can't believe we can't recognize this from one second to another. And if we do, then I should just stop talking about it. But I feel like there are some that seem to get lost in this. Just in case you missed it, though, those are crimes. No way around it. This will be in retribution, he says, for our many soldiers. Oh, so your soldiers died in your illegal war, so you respond by illegally bombing civilian locations? Sounds like a U.S. war to me. And others that Iran has butchered and killed over the 47-year reign of terror. That's stupidity. Do you realize? I mean, this is like Caitlin Johnstone laughed about. Funny how we never even heard of this 47-year war until March 6th or whatever the day it was. Technically, it's February 28th is what it was. The point, though, is that all of a sudden it's a 47-year war forever, nonstop, that we never heard about. It's just obviously not true, guys. I mean, it's embarrassing. And it says, thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay. So this is a note tweet from Golubov, which says, heads up, pre-market so-called news or truth is just often a setup for market profit taking. Basically, it's a reversed indicator. Do the opposite. If they pump it, short it. If they dump it, go long. Don't always do that. See something tomorrow? You know the drill. Express News says Trump is predictable. He did exactly as Golubov said. He did. So here we are again, threatening war crimes, but apparently it's all going well. If you listen to him on that show over there. Well, as the typical red light, holy crap morons come out and say, whatever Trump said, which is that Trump just revealed that Iran is sending 20 more oil boats through. Well, that's not what he said, by the way. What he said was, I watched them go through, which would have been yesterday, which I guess this is technically 20 hours ago, but that didn't happen. You could check for yourself. That literally didn't happen. As a sign of respect. Oh, so as a sign of respect, they sent you 20 boats full of oil, millions and millions of dollars, but yet they're not making a deal? You have to threaten them with war crimes? And from what I can tell, and I'll read it next directly from the Pakistani government, this has nothing to do with Trump. Next level gaslighting. Here's the clip from them. He's speaking with the White House, or it's on Air Force One, I believe. And I just wrote that this is sad because Pakistani officials, which you could look for yourself, have publicly confirmed that Iran agreed before this to allow 20 Pakistani flag vessels, roughly 2 per day. See, that's quite different than watching 8 run through the middle or 20 go right through the middle when Trump just happens to mention it, through the strait as a confidence-building measure tied to regional talks hosted in Pakistan, not as anything directed at the United States or involved with the United States or having anything to do with Trump's claims. So they all said. I mean, how much more can we laugh about that? I mean, at what point do you just stand back and go, he's just blatantly lying or somebody's lying to him? And at what point does he realize that if he's being lied to? I mean, so again, we can talk about the reality of this and how the truth has always been, wherever that was, of course, right there, is from, and look, this, I really want to stress this again. I've said it many times. From the very beginning of this, what did I tell you? Because, you could look and you have eyes, whether tankers or not, because the tankers are the main point. And if you want to make it only about tankers, well, based on their reaction to what the U.S. and Israel said was the reality, pretty much everybody paused. But the point was it was open. And I showed you that the day it was going on. And Iran was very clear. It said, as I just showed you, Hormuz is only closed for Zionists. Or the reality being close to enemies. That's what he said. And then just recently, Spain was going through with oil. We saw, and the point was in the beginning, that's what they were saying. Now, look, is it possible they were lying about that? Sure. But I'm not seeing them bomb any tankers. The only tankers we saw bomb were the U.S. and Israel right in the beginning. Why would they have done that? Clearly, Trump pretended he didn't want it to happen this way. And then they made sure the oil crisis became an issue because they needed that choke point. They needed this to be an issue so they could try to drive the world against Iran. That's what I believe. That's why I believe they thought they would break the strait down immediately, and they did not. They didn't take the bait, so they pretended they did. And they said there were mines. There were not mines. Do we remember that lie? That went by real quickly, didn't it? And now they are just going, now they're letting people through. That's important. I'm of the mind that they're genuinely going, anybody can go through here who is not fighting us at war right now. Just like the Houthis would do the same exact thing with Israel. Now, look, at some point, you have to look at the consistency, whatever the rhetoric is. And then recognize they're not what the people claim they are. So here's what he said in his press briefing.
He may be alive, but he's obviously very seriously in trouble.
So that's really low. So I won't talk after this. But what he said basically is he may be maybe not dead, but he's in serious trouble. The leader, right? So it just one day after day, it's a little bit more and more. Oh, he's in trouble. Like, I'm a school mom. You're in trouble now. Really, the point is that he hasn't. There's been no indication anything he ever said was happening. They just acted like the point was always selling you on this idea that Iran was 30 seconds away from collapse. They're all hiding in their tunnels with their phones and their woods with their fires, like Jesse Waters told you. And then, yeah, here we are, where they're increasing their bombings. And Trump seems to be desperately seeking a way out. But keep listening to those guys who told you the strait was shut and still pretend like it was shut closed all the way the entire time.
May be alive, but he's obviously very seriously in trouble. He's seriously wounded.
You had offered that 15-point plan to Iran. Did they ever come back with a response?
They came back with the 15-point
plan. What did they say?
They gave us most of the points.
Oh, they gave you most of the points, did they? You mean aside from literally none of them? You can go through that and laugh at that, guys. I went through it in the last show. They didn't. I mean, see, here's what I really think is part of this, what he's trying to lead to, but Iran is just not allowing it to take place. You see, in the past, Iran has been very passive in the narrative side of it, where Trump can come up and be like, we win and we did it, like the so-called 12-day war. They really didn't push back that much in regard to the lie he spun about because I think they wanted this to stop. That was why I think they sort of made an agreement. We'll bomb, you bomb, we back away. And Trump said, we win. And really, if you look at the damage, it was clear that I think Iran came out on top in regard to what they did with Israel. You can look for yourself, look back. Same thing we're seeing right now. And so I think part of this is him expecting that he can just yell, I won, like always, and think they're not going to push back, but they're not letting it happen. So in this case, they gave us 15-point plan. They gave us most of it. I think the first two of the main three revolved around not having nuclear weapons. So my point is, I think he was going to say, we did it. They agreed, like he already said, not to have a nuclear weapon, knowing that they never actually planned to, knowing the evidence showed they didn't have one now, and acting like that we did that. That seems very Trump, if you understand how he's always operated. To take to use the lie he knew was a lie, to go to war for Israel, and then try to wrap it up by claiming that he made them not do the thing they never did in the first place. And all the life that was killed just for that. My opinion.
15-point plan to Iran. Did they ever come back with a response?
They came back on
what
the 15-point
What did they
plan.
say?
They gave us most of the points. Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they? Maybe because you're murdering their families? I don't know.
You make it sound like they've made some concessions. Can you identify those?
Well, they're agreeing with us on the plan. I mean, we asked for 15 things.
Okay, so again, now the other side of the possibility. They're agreeing with you on the plans. So again, he could just be lying. But with that kind of a statement, doesn't it make you wonder whether he really is talking to somebody? I get that sense half the time. And if that's the case, then he's being played, guys. Somebody's on the phone acting like, whether it's, look, guys, Kushner and Jared Kushner and Witkoff are the people who are relaying this to Trump. He's not in that room. He's admitted that. So, and these are people who have been publicly called essentially Israeli assets. That's a quote from the diplomats in the room when they're dealing with Iran. I mean, diplomats in regard to, there's foreign minister from Oman. There's people from multiple points of the conversation. And they did it. They didn't want to say who they were. It was two diplomats involved in the conversation. The point, though, is that you can clearly see that reality. And then you can see that Israel's doing the same to Trump from the very beginning, driving this into reality. Trump admitting that they did this and they had to rush because Trump was going to stop. Come on, you have to think about this possibility. And now even if he maybe even senses that could be happening, what's he going to do? He's going to turn around and blow up his own agenda? He would go to jail. I mean, right now, he could go to prison for the illegal war if he turns around and pushes back against what the Israel side is doing. Just thoughts.
For the most part, we're going to be asking for a couple of other things. And just to prove that they're serious, they gave us all these votes. When I talked about 4 days ago, a present, I said they gave me a present, but I didn't think I was at liberty to say what it was. What it was 8 plus 2. It's 10 massive boatloads of oil.
Which, by the way, according to everybody with the GPS, it didn't happen. They said they're right. When he said that, there's nothing happening. There was no 8 boats that went through today. Didn't happen. I mean, you can look for yourself. I reported it the day it happened. So are we just going to don't know that that's a lie? Or are we going to question whether or not he's being lied to as well?
They gave us another present. They gave us 20 boatloads of oil. That starts.
All right, so even right there. So why would you then frame it on Financial Times the day before as 10 more and make it 20 total? He just clearly said 20 more, right?
Being shipped.
It's kind of like when he talks about the ships and we're sank from Iran, how the number seems to change every single day. And in the first 3 days, we took down 45. In the first 3 days, we took down 60 ships. The first 3 days, we took down 20, all those ships. The clip's going around. Watch for yourself.
Tomorrow, we're having very good meetings, both directly and indirectly, and I think we're getting a lot of very important points.
Sure. And he's been saying that for 2 weeks now. And Iran says that's not true and keeps bombing locations. And by the way, regardless of what Trump says, when they were supposed to right now be pausing infrastructure, as I showed you yesterday, they were bombing infrastructure, both U.S. and Israel, largely Israel, and specifically nuclear infrastructure. And so Trump lied or is not in control. I mean, there's really no other way to look at that. U.S. oil tankers flying pack flags. Iranian embassy rejects Trump's claims. So, it's all public. I really don't see how there's any other possibility here. He's either just so concerned with how embarrassing this is for him that he'll just lie himself into the ground, or he is of the mind this is really going this way and he's being played by somebody. Those are the two most obvious possibilities to me. I mean, unless there's some major part of information we're not seeing, in my mind, it has to be one of those two things. Or you could say on top of that he is speaking to somebody, but there's been 1,000 reasons why, or little points within this that show you that there's something that doesn't add up. But that very well could mean something other than he's being lied to. But we'll include that to be objective. Now, here's what tankertrackers.com put. Vessels, meaning all categories, which is important, by the way. But as far as tankers are concerned, it says it is still around 2 a day. Well, sorry, this is just Besant is saying seeing more and more ships go through Hormuz. And this says vessels, according to them, means all categories. But as far as tankers are concerned, it is still around 2 a day. And half of those are carrying Iranian oil and refined products. Now, this is from the tanker tracker. Now, what I'm showing you is Besant, which I'll show you a clip next, is saying we're seeing more ships go through. But that doesn't appear to be the reality. And I'm not saying it's because Iran is stopping them, as I keep showing you. I think, my opinion, is that they're only hindering people who are fighting them. So, one, why are they first pretending like it's been shut down? We addressed that. Two, why would he suddenly be saying more is now going through, even though it appears to be the same it's been the entire time? Where they could, but because of the threats and what the people are hesitant. Well, I think that's obvious because Trump said they're happening. So the narrative becomes, well, more going through, but they weren't, and it's never really been closed in the first place. We're living in this like shadow game of just complete nonsense right now, where it's wag the dog stuff, or we wouldn't even call it wag the dog. They're just whole cloth making up stories. That's what I think we're dealing with. All to kind of beef up whatever Trump happened to off the cuff say that day, right? He just randomly says something and all the rest have to shuffle around to make sure his story looks like it's actually happening. I mean, it's probably more complicated than that, but I just think it's interesting how clear we're being lied to. And again, Iran has been clear up until right now that they're only stopping enemies. Here's what Besant just said. Coming right over the top after everything we just heard. We're making deals and we're talking, and this is what Besant comes out and says.
Deals with the Iranian regime for the time being. But over time, the U.S. is going to retake control of the straits, and there will be freedom of navigation, whether it is...
Retake, implying they ever had strategic control over the Strait of Hormuz. They did not. Now, I've never argued that Iran should even legally have sole control, since there's other land masses that sort of, are in that situation. But the only reason this has always been an issue, and the only reason they've always talked about what they might do should this come to pass, is because everybody knew, in a strategic sense, Iran controls the strait, as they're demonstrating right now, right? It's not about whether they should or not. It's just what the reality was. And so this idea that they would regain control, that's never been the case, at least not in living memory with what we're dealing with. So it's a funny way to frame that. It's just, you need to think about it. These are not just accidents in language. These are deliberate dishonesty, that's my opinion.
The U.S. is going to retake control of the straits, and there will be freedom of navigation, whether...
Well, again, there is now for people that are not illegally bombing foreign countries.
It is through U.S. escorts or a multinational escort.
Which nobody agreed to, and it seems that still nobody wants to, despite how they tried to claim that was happening, right? Remember, at first, he said that, and nobody agreed to it, which was kind of embarrassing. Then he came back around and said, we got all these nations. And you got this kind of weird push from the typical red light, holy crap guys, where they were, oh my God, all the Democrats are embarrassed because 75 countries signed on for Trump's initiative. Not that I can tell. You got a lot of people that signed on for sort of a general sentiment conversation. As far as I can tell, that was a misrepresentation of countries that were involved with the ongoing conversation towards Iran, but did not in any way sign on to escort militarily export. I can't talk. Militarily escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a very different thing, you understand, because that is something that would be they'd be seen as co-belligerents for the U.S. government, and they would be legal targets going with what's going on, and they would also then be restricted to the Strait. That's why they all pretty much said no. But don't forget how the fake mainstream alternative media patriot MAGA movement wanted you to believe it was all coming down because Trump said it that day.
So are you concerned at all about the Houthis getting involved? They shelled Israel.
The real name is the Ansarallah movement. Remember that?
With two rockets. Are you worried about the Red Sea?
Not as much. The Houthis have been very quiet so far.
Yeah, right. Because you guys technically have a ceasefire right now with them, which they're not going to tell you because they don't care about any ceasefire agreement. They do, though, and the Houthis have maintained that. And what they just said is, we're now going to enter this war on the side of Iran. And if you bomb us, you're breaking the ceasefire. We're not going to bomb you. We're only going to be focused on Israel. I guarantee they'll bomb them when they want to. Now, and recognize, though, that he is worried because they got utterly destroyed in the sense of strategy in regard to what they did in the Red Sea. They didn't kill anybody. They didn't sink any ships. They only bombed in a hindrance capacity, didn't sink any ships, didn't kill anybody, didn't steal anything, but effectively stopped them from bringing things to a large degree to Israel. And they called them pirates. Even though you have our government, the U.S. government, bombing and, without any investigation, without rather any, process. They can claim they investigate. I frankly don't even believe that, but just murdering boats and ships and things all over the world. But these people who were helping the people being genocided, who were stopping the people who were supposed to be arrested in the world, didn't kill anybody, didn't steal anything, and didn't sink a ship, but they're the pirates. Got it. Meanwhile, here's Saudi Arabia, who's illegally occupying their territory, working with a foreign government to steal things from Yemen, starving the entire population and bombing them periodically. But yeah, you tell me again, while the Ansar Allah movement are the terrorists and pirates, while they're supported by the majority of people in Yemen. It's like every other story, guys. This is who we deal with. Now, in regard to the conversation, I'll include the two shows that we, the recent ones. Trump's claims of an Iranian defector on the 25th, belied, the 24th really, but the fifth conversation, belied by new U.S. proposals for current Iranian leadership. That's when he said, here's my 15-point plan. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. And here we are. And now the follow-up was the simply Trump's faux negotiation. Here, again, is what he said. Serious discussions with a new, more reasonable regime to end the military operations. Oh, wait, this is the one? Yeah, we read this a second ago. And the point was a new, more reasonable regime. And then he posted again on the White House account. The United States of America is in a serious discussion with a new and more reasonable regime. Okay, so how do you take that? What do you mean a new and more reasonable regime? Did the Iranian people have an election? Okay, so then you're just handpicking individuals that you want to be in power? Yes, as always. You called it a regime. Now, why would we think that, what happened to the guy you were just talking to? What happened to the deal you just gave them? What if they accepted that? On top of all of it, the new, more reasonable regime that you want to put in power, why wouldn't we consider that that's literally the Shah or the MEK? Which, by the way, the very provable thing is the reality is that Iranians despise both those groups. So I guess we'll find out. Or he's lying about all of it, or somebody's lying to him. Here's what Leavitt had to say today.
Ron, the president has said that the administration is talking to a new and more reasonable regime. How confident are you that they are legitimate and have enough grip on power? Marco Rubio said earlier that he's not sure and it's not clear whether they will be in power. So are you also talking to other factions? As the president is trying to make a deal, how do you ensure that you're making a deal with the people who can actually implement it?
Well, that's part of the ongoing process that's taking place. And the ongoing negotiations, of course, anything that they say to us privately will be tested, and we will ensure that they are being held accountable to their word. And if they are not, the president has laid out the military consequences that the Iranian regime will see if they don't hold true to the words that we are hearing privately behind the scenes. When the president says more...
Okay, so here's an interesting thought. Hypothetically, should he be being played by Iran, or excuse me, by Israel, and but he's of the mind he's talking to Iran, and they go, we promise all of this. And she said, well, if they don't follow through, then we'll bomb them. How easy would that be for Israel to simply manufacture Trump's bombing of Iran to drive what they want out of the situation? Don't forget, their own media yesterday and today are publicly saying that if this goes to ground troops, which it already is, by the way, that Israel will not be doing that. Like we all told you.
Ongoing process that's taking place and the ongoing negotiations, of course.
Regime said that the administration is talking to a new and more reasonable regime. How confident are you that they are legitimate and have enough grip on power? Marco Rubio said earlier that he's not sure and it's not clear whether they will be in power. So
again, that's what I wanted to play again right there. Is think about that. The idea that we're not clear if they're in power. So what does it even mean? Why would you even negotiate with somebody who, again, you understand, Witkoff, they're in the room with the Iranian government. The ones they keep pretending like they're dead and we don't know what they are. They're not even in power, except we sit down with them every day and have negotiations. They're lying to you guys in 1,000 ways that you can prove for yourself if you're not completely stupid.
Are you also talking to other factions? As the president is trying to make a deal, how do you ensure that you're making a deal with the people who can actually implement it?
Yeah, who can actually follow through with that? Why? Because, well, they'll militarily force in whatever they decide is in the interest of them, otherwise known as what they pretend is for the Iranian people, for them, for what they want. We will force in militarily what we want in this situation and call that democracy. Welcome to U.S. foreign policy.
Well, that's part of the ongoing process that's taking place. And the ongoing negotiations, of course, anything that they say to us privately will be tested, and we will ensure that they are being held accountable to their word. And if they are not, the president has laid out the military consequences that the Iranian regime will see if they don't hold true to the words that we are hearing privately behind the scenes. When the president says more reasonable, again, these folks are appearing more reasonable behind the scenes privately in these conversations than perhaps some of the previous leaders who are now no longer on planet.
So your response when she asks what that means is to simply repeat that it's more reasonable. Very, very well done, Leave It, because I don't think they even know what they're talking about right now. I don't even think she has any frame of reference on the group that they're even referring to. Right? So the question, what do you mean? More reasonable? What's with the group?
It has laid out the military consequences that the Iranian regime will see if they don't hold true to the words that we are hearing privately. It says more reasonable. Again, these folks are appearing more reasonable behind the scenes privately in these conversations than perhaps some of the previous leaders who are.
Meaning more reasonable, they'll give up everything they want for you. Right? Who cares about the Iranian people? Take whatever you want. Just let us rule. Yes, more reasonable.
Now no longer on planet Earth because they lied to the United States
wow.
and they strung us along in negotiations, and that was unacceptable to the.
Oh, wait a minute now. So what are you talking about? The only people that we know of that have been killed are the people that were in the middle of negotiations while you bombed them. Let's not pretend. Let's not let her muddy the waters here, guys. This is important. 12-day war, they literally murdered them in the midst of negotiations. They did that again with Khamenei. They did it again. Like, this is their tactic. They did it in Lebanon. They did it with Soleimani. So realize that was all before this. Since then, we've had this weird game of I'm dealing with Iranians, but doesn't seem to be happening. Then we have the weird defector point with a new guy, maybe Galibaf, talk with him. Then next day, back to Iran's government. Now, a third group that's more reasonable, apparently, we're talking to them. But so what are you saying? That you saying you murdered people for lying to you and stringing along negotiations? Well, where would that have possibly taken place? Did you murder people that we're not aware of? Or are you trying to pretend that when you illegally murdered the group of Iranian negotiators who were not military targets while they were literally about to agree to everything you asked for and Israel murdered them, that was you bombing them because they lied to you and strung you along? Maybe because Israel lied to you about what was actually happening. Seeing as how we can literally prove from the foreign minister of Oman that what they agreed to was to give up everything. One, what they already were doing, no nuclear weapon, but they were willing to give up their enriched uranium even for civilian programs. They finally agreed that never before. And that night, Israel bombed them. You can't miss how this goes.
President, which is why many of the previous longer on planet Earth because they lied to the United States and they strung us along in negotiations, and that was unacceptable to the president.
Also point out that apparently in Trump's mind, it's legal to just murder somebody because they said something that you thought wasn't true. I mean, let's just make that clear. At this point, we're not talking about a legal war. There's no declaration of war. There's no imminent threat. So what you're saying, you could just literally murder people because they lied to you? I guess so. I'm actually baffled they even say these things out loud anymore. I don't get it. Where is their international community? These people should be in prison, guys. I mean, so should Biden, so should the rest of them. But this is insane how blatantly obvious this is.
Which is why many of the previous leaders were killed. So again, this is another historic opportunity for Iran to do the right thing, to rid themselves of their nuclear ambitions.
Right, to rid themselves of their nuclear ambitions. You mean what they already agreed to give up before you started this illegal war? You just can't make, these people are desperate and they're dishonest. I mean, I'm of the mind that even Leave It knows they're making this up just by the way that they're returning this information.
And to come to a deal with this president and the administration, or again, they will see the grave consequences of the United States Armed Forces, which they are.
Yeah, so we'll murder you. We'll militarily act if you don't give us what we want. That's called negotiation in Trump's mind, apparently.
Continuing to see every day throughout this operation.
Wow. So here's Trump, a new, more reasonable regime, right? Well, here's Rubio contradicting that to a degree.
Today, we have to see if these people end up being the ones in charge, seeing if they're the ones that have the power to deliver. We're going to test it. We are hopeful that that's the case. There are clearly people there talking to us in ways that previous people in charge in Iran have not spoken to us in the past.
Now, what I think is hilarious about this, the same thing they do with Delcy Rodriguez. What did he say? And always note the little inconsistencies between the way he frames it and Trump frames it. They said, well, we're going to see if Delcy does what she says she'll do. If she doesn't, we'll get rid of her. They're not even hiding it. That was, basically maybe one word difference, paraphrasing exactly what Trump was saying, and Rubio. So we're being told, people save Iranians and democracy. And then, we're going to give her a chance to see if she does what we want. Basically that's exactly what he said. And that if they don't give us our interest, that we will get somebody else in place. And even insinuated they could just take her out, kill her. That's what they said. And he's doing the same thing right now. Well, we're talking to them and we'll see if they can give us what we want. And if they don't give us what we want, we could take action. These are terrorists. Let's not mince words. This is what terrorism looks like. Terrorism looks like.
The things they're willing to do, some of the things they're saying they're willing to do. Obviously, they have to go do it. We're going to test that proposition very strongly because we always prefer to settle things through negotiation and diplomacy. But we also have to be prepared for the fact that that effort might fail, that we are dealing with a 47-year-old regime that still has a lot of people involved in it who aren't necessarily big fans of diplomacy.
Right. Okay, we get it. So Trump tells you it's all good. It's more reasonable, great regime. We're going to make a deal like he's told you the last 3 days with different people. And he comes in and says, we're dealing with an old regime and it's got a lot of unreasonable people. Perfect. So here is what he says about the Strait. The world should take note of Iran's threats to set up a system in the Strait. I commented on this.
The Iranians are threatening that they're going to set up some permanent system in the Straits of Hormuz where they get to decide who goes through international waterways. That will never be allowed to happen. By the way, the rest of the world should take note of that. They have more at stake there than we do. We get very little of our energy in this country coming through the Straits of Hormuz. The rest of the world gets a lot more.
Oh, well, then I guess thank you for admitting fully that you're doing this for Israel entirely, seeing as how you'd have an interest. Then why are you involved? For Israel, clearly. Thanks for clearing that up. But the point... Oh, did I, how did I forget that? There was, maybe it was over here. Nope. Shoot. It's not necessarily important. It was a meme that somebody shared. But so the point I want to make here, as Daniel says, guess when Iran wasn't talking about such a system? Before you launched a sneak attack against them. Idiots. Right. So first point, as everything else they're doing is, well, they're now doing something that justifies our action. But they're only doing that thing because you started this illegal war. So you attack them illegally, they do a thing, and then you go, that's the thing. That's the reason we're at war with them. That's how this is working. Now, like, for example, similarly, people are saying, well, we're at war to keep the Strait open. Yes. Now, this is different. This is about the toll, but the Strait wasn't closed before you did this, and it's not closed now. It's restricted to you guys. But what did I say? This was on the 25th. Now, the point is not to forget, guys, that, I say it right in this tweet comment, really. I said, watch as the usual suspects framed this, the toll, the conversation, as either unprecedented, like he's trying to do, or an act of terrorism, which he's also doing in some conversations, even though it seems to be common practice just about everywhere else in the world. Look for yourself. Straits, canals, Panama, Suez, they all charge. Now, you may argue, well, in some cases, those are unique to one location. Well, most of them are not, by the way. They just have agreements. Well, what about, like, for example, in like the area, like the waterways between Mexico and the United States? The what does he call it? What did he change it to? I don't even know. The point is, as well as I, or Cuba, for example, didn't Donald Trump just restrict Russia from sending oil to Cuba? But you're going to tell me it's not okay for Iran to do? You see, it's a double standard. My point is always, we know, as we've all acknowledged, which is why this is happening, that Iran has had strategic control over the Strait this entire time. They're demonstrating that now. So my point is why every other strait in the world seems to be, they'll charge like $1 million for some of these gigantic ships. Iran has never done that, as far as I could tell. Now, yeah, the bad guy, right? And I'm not even making it good, bad, but the point is for them to frame them as the evil one, and yet they're the ones that haven't been extorting people. It just kills me. So my point again is that we now can see them playing this role as expected, as what you could easily predict. That they just find an opening and they go, oh my God, they're trying to threaten us with fees like everywhere else. And as Daniel points out, well, they weren't before you illegally attacked them. Idiot. Exactly. Just crazy. Now, I'll include this as always, Strait of Hormuz, so you can look for yourself. Let me check real quick and see where the tankers are. I found it interesting that there were a couple that were even U.S. tankers. Oh, look at that. Right there. Now, technically, I'm actually unfamiliar. I think the circle is like an extension of. So if you remember these little gray lines, that's the territorial waters for, the UAE right here. Or, for example, on the other side, that would be for Iran, right? And that's why you can argue that they that side would be theirs, but they can control it from the island here, right? And bomb anything that comes through. That's the argument. But here we have tankers. These are oil tankers. Here's two right there. And this one is, what's the details? Let me just make sure I'm not misreading. Oh, Marshall Islands. Two of them. And weirdly enough, a U.S. tanker right in there. No more that I can see. But, and this is changing all day long. So that's not what we're hearing. I mean, anyway, the point simply is that this is technically open, and it has been from the beginning. And tankers are the main conversation. But if you want to just look at generally speaking, clearly it's open. So, and this is a live map. Now, before we get into some quick partisan points and then just finish with the however long it takes with the rest of the point, obviously that took longer than I wanted, but I still think it was important to make sure we're updated on that. Just to really think about that, the lies that we can see. And I'm not going to say I know what it means. I don't. Like, for sure. Like I said, it could be that he's being misled. It could be that he's just lying. Him lying to you seems to sort of be like Occam's razor. It seems to be the simplest explanation. But I feel like there's parts to it. It's a mixed bag, where maybe he's lying to you, but then maybe he's also over here being played by somebody else, maybe his inner circle. Maybe, maybe it's even like personal agendas within his administration. I don't know. And you see, it's not in our interest to assume. Wait for facts. Converse, theorize, discuss. So for me right now, though, I just think it's painful to watch how these people are trying to sort of gaslight you into thinking, one, that they just are succeeding by falling back into the situation that existed before they started this. And all that really happened was that Israel got what they wanted to a small degree, or they tried to out of Iran and essentially failed. What they are doing is gaining ground in Lebanon right now, which nobody wants to consider as part of the same conversation, apparently, even though it's always been part of the greater Israel agenda, which is what this is. But just question this stuff. Call out the partisan people that we're going to point to now really quickly, because this is all they're doing right now. Now, I almost didn't include this because I pointed this last couple of days, and I just had to because of the last thing that I saw. But it's just it really quickly, just to continue the same point, if you guys have been following the last couple of shows, is we always get this stuff from partisans. They come out and go, well, a lot of different things. A hype story to get you to go, oh my God, look at that thing, and then never goes anywhere, right? Most times stories that I care about, things that I do want to see accountability for. Obama, Pelosi, I do think they should be in jail. Maybe not for the same reasons you may think out there, but I do agree. I think they're criminals. So what's frustrating and funny and alarming at the same time is how often these people come out and it will play old videos or hype this idea in a general sense, right? But then right now, or in certain circumstances, what I see is that it just explodes. Like when they're uncomfortably being seen to lie about an Iran negotiation, or when the Epstein files are very uncomfortable for them. You get these massive pushes where the typicals, the Glenn Becks, the Jones, the Nick Sorters, the Benny Johnsons, they all almost identically share things that are like, look at that. Now, Jones doesn't do the whole red light, holy crap thing, not always, but they're all generally selling the same sentiments. And I think that's very clear. And it's about trying to convince you that one thing is happening when something else is going on. So same thing here. And this is the same guy that seems to be doing this constantly. And it just is, Tulsi Gabbard is actively investigating the Ukraine officials paying Biden. Yeah, they're good. Arrest him. Pretty sure it's clear. You can see that there was corruption going on there. Why isn't he in jail, though, Eric? If you care so much and you post this every 30 seconds, don't you then also get frustrated that this is regurgitated information from a year ago, that we are clearly aware this has been going on, right? Now, there's new stuff coming out about this, but this story is not new. And even if it is, why isn't there action? It's not. There is not action going on. There's nothing in this direction. Now, look, I hope it does. And if it happens tomorrow, I'll be the first to say, oh, I was wrong. I'm glad it's happening. But it's not happening right now. As this person says, you loons post one of these official groundbreaking breaking news investigations 3 times a week. Everyone seems to see it. If you look at the comments, same thing I just said, and watch as nothing happens, as always. And all these team smart politics players won't say a word, but they'll sure as hell hype the next hollow claim that Obama, Gates, and Pelosi are going down with a couple of red lights. Well, here's even Anna Paulina Luna, who shares this guy's post without due diligence. Well, I guess really just they all share the comment. It was Russia collusion. It was Dem collusion, or it wasn't Russia. It was Dem collusion and USAID. And now watch as nothing happens about it. Same old story. So just continue to note these people are hyping the story even though nothing is going on about it. Just like they did a week ago and a week before that and a year before that. So you can stand back and go, well, maybe they care about it, but wouldn't they be angry that the team they fight for is doing nothing about the people that they were swore they were trying to kill our family and, destroy our party. Well, here's the same thing. Luna doing the same thing from the Obama side of it. New evidence from ODNI confirms what many suspected. She literally wrote, she is in Congress, guys. This is her congressional account. And she posted new evidence. This video is from 2025. Check for yourself. 2025. We're talking about an old video that is relaying what because it's based on the Tulsi Gabbard thing that came out last year, where she's like, big bombshell report about how Obama did that. Good, arrest him then. I'll support that. But they didn't. Miller and Trump even called him a traitor. Treason was used. There's not, as far as I can tell, there's not even legal processes going on. Nothing's happening. He should be in jail. Same thing here. This SCIF, most of these accounts are 100,000 followers, so on. I think this one's 300,000. It says, our greatest enemies come from within and the Russian collusion. Same thing. And an old video about Tulsi Gabbard and Obama. You'd think you'd be outraged that nothing has happened, seeing as how that video is from 2025. Does it not bother you that the government you support pretends to arrest these criminals, then does absolutely nothing? It should, if your interest is in accountability. But they just keep doing it over and over and over. Here's another one. This one I found even more interesting because it makes the point even more clear that Trump is doing it too. So, and hey, Liz Crokin shared it. Isn't she part of the most transparent administration Epstein file effort? Well, March 30th, this person posted a screenshot that shows Trump sharing this and says, traitors who commit treason belong in prison. Oh, big, tough words from the big, tough MAGA fake team. Well, guess what? Trump did post this back in July 2025. And they're just talking about it. Among one of the things he posted was this image. It says, until this happens, nothing will change. And it shows Obama and what's his name? It was Clinton and the brothers. I'm blanking on his name all of a sudden right here. What is it? The creepy Pizzagate related brothers. I forget his name all of a sudden. But, all the different Democrats, right? None of which are in jail. None. So my point is, if Trump posts this, which he did, who knows when, because the point is they give you a screenshot, then he's playing that game too. He wants you to think he's doing it, but here we are, right? No, it was 2025 from the article. And it's been a year. Okay, Trump. Okay, SCIF. Why aren't they arrested? Don't you guys care? Well, you get the point. They don't care. If they cared, they'd be screaming about this right now. The ones that care have already changed, have started calling out the people who don't do what they're calling for. Podesta, thank you. The people that, like for 5 times August, for example, was supporting the team until he realized they were lying to him because he's not a moron. And he came out and said, you guys are ridiculous and I'm going to call you out. And he has ever since because he has principles, guys. That's the point. These accounts don't care. Liz Crokin, Eric Howderty, Benny John, they are go along, get along, fair weather manipulators. It's what they do. Next show, by the way, we're going to make a point about Alex Jones suddenly going, oh my God, look, they fund Al-Qaeda. Like he's mentioned in the past, but like it's a bombshell. Or pointing to what Trump is doing in Iran and calling it the New World Order. He is such a fair weather. How embarrassing. He must be so uncomfortable right now. He literally just told us to double down with Trump 3 days ago. He just told you Trump was fighting the New World Order and globalism. And here he is now going, welcome to the New World Order. These people are spinning out, guys. And I hope they find their way to the truth if that's even possible for them. Like an honest path. Oh, one little point on this, which is just funny to me. If you go back and look at this coverage, many of them are being honest about the claim, which is 500 different groups, which collectively have an annual revenue of $3 billion, which is a very different thing than saying that the No Kings protests were funded for $3 billion, right? Even though that's how a lot of people in the broken new media reported it. Well, they put out a page which, by the way, I guarantee there's probably things that aren't even accurate in that, but it's not the point. The page they're all circulating showing the finances, which, by the way, shows you that they publicly post this stuff, which means it's not trying to be hidden from anybody. But let's make that. But then the dark money side of the Republicans' effort was stop the steal. That's the one you can trust. No, you can't trust any of them, left or right. But he says, Kevin Sorbo, even though he keeps getting, anyway, I did the same thing to him last time. How many times can he support this until he realizes they're not doing it for him? I guess one more time. He's doing the same thing. Go after Obama, showing old videos. I don't know why he doesn't strike me as a dishonest person. I just like to think they can eventually see through how obvious this is. But he says, we now have a list of No Kings financiers. And he lists off the same ones we showed you yesterday. And he shows you a shade under $300 million. which, if you remember, do you remember what we talked about yesterday? And they stopped the steal was about $300 million. How funny is that? And there was only one. There was plenty of others as well. So the argument becomes that it looks like that was something about the same. Shocking, I know, because it happens on both sides, and both sides do it, and we should concern ourselves with both. As I wrote here, Tom Wren says, if no one goes to jail, why does it matter? Now, reading it now, you could argue he's simply saying, like, in a general sense, if nobody ever goes to jail anywhere, why are you even griping about it? I completely agree with that, and I'm glad he's calling that out because Kevin does that a lot. But if he was suggesting that somebody should go to jail for that, I thought this was a good point to make. I simply said, look, Tom, I'm right here. I'm right there with you about the concerns over manipulation taking place via billionaire funding of protest movements on both sides. We all should care about that. But what exactly are we suggesting is the crime here? This feels like a trap to undermine people fighting government overreach in a time when it's never been more necessary, by the way, which is our right. All I'm saying is, I'm concerned about what they're doing and how they're manipulating through this. But if there's not, what's the crime here? Point to the manipulation, acknowledge it. But if it ends up being, well, you're not allowed to coordinate efforts against calling out the government, well, guess what? That very much works in the interest of the government. Worth considering. Okay. Took longer than I wanted on that first part, but I don't know. You guys tell me. I feel like that stuff's important to keep up on, even over 24 hours, because you missed some. But let's talk about this. This, guys, beyond the pale. I mean, this is just incredible to me. MIT Technology and Review. Inside the stealthy startup that pitched brainless human clones. Orwell sent me this. This was today. Came out today. March 30th, 2026. I almost used that picture, actually. It's weird, creepy looking picture. Inside the stealthy startup that pitched brainless human clones. Isn't that crazy? I mean, just the idea of this feels, like you're I don't even know what you call it. Your instincts are like, that seems crazy, right? Like, that's something, someone's trying to fool me. But no, this seems to be really ongoing. In an interview with Wired, it's R3, the group is R3 Bio, is the name of the company. R3 listed 3 investors. Billionaire Tim Draper, the Singapore-based fund Immortal Dragons, that's one that I'm going to focus on, and life extension investors Long Game Ventures. There is more to the story, and R3 doesn't want that story told. MIT Technology Review discovered that the stealth startup's founder, John, I think it's Schloendorn, also pitched a startling, medically graphic, and ethically charged vision for what he's called, quote, brainless clones to serve the role of backup human bodies. Now, what we're going to go through here is the connection to some very alarming movements that are driving, I think, the reimagining of our society right now, and the network state agenda, same conversation, but and the connection to the political drive and the current administration. But just this overlap. I mean, one of the weird things that constantly jumps out at me is that we're talking about people that are largely right now, and I think it's just because this is always these billionaires that are sort of above nationality, above political sides, like just that'll dump money in whatever sides will gain them influence in the conversation, which is why we saw Palantir dump on both sides. And now they just shot, it's what happens, guys. It's the same game. The point is that what I keep seeing here is that right now, again, maybe just because of that, but you see a ton of these technocratic, transhumanist longevity freaks in this movement who are pretending they're Christian right. And, we believe in Christianity, and yet what they're doing in here is inherently anti-religion. I mean, this is borderline becoming, like, this is about creating a circumstance where you can live forever, where you can create life, or even, we'll get into whether you want to even call it life. But technically speaking, we're talking about living things that don't have any brain process, human bodies and otherwise. I'm willing to bet you without question that the vast majority of people who are genuinely of the Christian perspective and on the right in this sense, would be outraged about this conversation, and would be outraged to find out that it's very close to RFK Jr. and Donald Trump, the ones that are, acting like we're saving you from all these terrible things, and all of which is aggressively close to the larger conversation for the global direction we're talking about. Now it says, imagine it like this: a baby version of yourself with only enough of a brain structure to be alive in case you ever need a new kidney or liver. There's I've heard the name of the movie with Scarlett Johansson, I believe, where the movie like that, where the movie starts with the people inside of this kind of weird, it's called the island. That's right. Where they're inside of this weird little place they live, and they're told this fake story about where they have to grow up and they can move to the island. But the really turns out, well, spoiler alert, in case you want to watch it, take a second to pause. Ultimately, it turns out where they're clones that are grown for very wealthy people that are kind of kept on the edge of their, as soon as we get your number drawn, we'll send you out to the world. And their number is drawn once they need to kill them for their organs because they got in a car accident or whatever. And it's just this creepy overlapping movie. And guys, it's not to say that every single thing like that is always the case or can be, but you have to realize, first of all, technologically speaking, scientifically speaking, at least based on what they're presenting here, that's very possible already. And we'll get into that. There's a dispute on that, but you'll see what I mean. And so the point is, let's just even say you get to the point beyond this where it's very much possible. Just because they want to tell you it's not something we're doing or because we see ethical boundaries, the point is once that line is crossed, maybe they're not even the ones making those decisions anymore. Maybe they lied to you. Or maybe another 1,000 possibilities where this becomes just the norm, and then it's too late. Happens with everything we do. And in most cases, I'm arguing they knew it was going to go here and they just gaslit you into supporting it in the first place. This is what our government has done my entire life with everything we're dealing with. I mean, look at what they happened with the COVID-19 shots from left and right. The point is that I'm guaranteeing you that the direction, if not already taking place, is the darkest versions of what you see in this. Historically, we're absolutely right in worrying about that. Now it says, or alternatively, well, I guess my point to be more clear is that if we open that, we cross that line, even like for the AI conversation, it shouldn't be about which way we do it. We should be having real conversations about whether we even want to cross these lines. Because the point is, from these kind of billionaires, they drive with their media manipulation, their forceful opinions, that's just what it is. It's inevitable. So we might as well pick this because we have to beat China. And, there's logic to these arguments. But it seems as if they're just kind of bull rushing over whether we should be doing it in the first place. At the very least, we should have that conversation at the highest level, and they're not allowing that. Same with 5G and all the rest of these conversations. They just rush it forward, and then once it's there, it's too late now. We have to. Like Stardust Solutions, for example, and all the rest of these things. That's the way they bull rush this in. So it says, imagine it like this, baby version of yourself, should you need the organs. Or alternatively, he has speculated, you might one day get your brain placed into a younger clone. That could be a way to gain a second lifespan, which is what these older billionaires are desperately seeking, through a still hypothetical procedure known as a body transplant. The fuller context of R3's proposals, as well as activities of another stealth startup with related goals, have not previously been reported. They've been kept secret by a circle of extreme life extension proponents who fear that their plans for immortality could be derailed by clickbait headlines and public backlash. Well, that's a surefire way to make sure we're very skeptical, is to keep it secret and pretend like we don't understand, right? I mean, guys, it's quite obvious that there's the reason they don't want this to be public is because they know that people would be outraged by this. One, because it's alarming and well beyond control, but two, because most of the people that are supporting their agendas right now are connected to the Christian right, in my opinion. It says, and that's because the idea can sound like something straight from a creepy science fiction film. What do you mean sounds like? It's quite literally exactly the premise of a science fiction film. One person who heard R3 Bio's clone presentation and spoke on the condition of anonymity was left reeling by its implications and shaken by Schlorendorn's how would you say that properly? I'm going to decide right now and go for Schlorendorn's enthusiastic delivery. The briefing, this person said, was like a close encounter of the third kind with Dr. Strangelove. It says, and he's talked about how to grow a clone. Since artificial wombs don't exist yet, so we're told, brainless bodies can't be grown in a lab. So he said the first batch of brainless clones would have to be carried by women paid to do the job. So one thing I want to get into early, keep in your mind, because it does go there in this conversation, is in the overlap of these kind of unregulated network state, CEO run, technocratic hellscapes like Prospera. These are the kind of things they could be doing right now. And I argue they are doing right now. Whether this exact thing which I'm going to get into, like I said, with MiniCircle. You can look at what they're doing, look up the name, look at the kind of stuff they're working on. And with no regulation, there's 1,000 ways this stuff could hurt the entire planet. I mean, we're talking about genetic manipulation, things that could potentially, we talked about this when it came to like the overlap of the, like Monsanto and the seeds, for example. And that's what they literally made these things that could just blow into your field. And then they patented your seed. I'm going to get into this story. I'll play a good clip at the end that makes a point from that. But the problem is you get into this manipulation that has even like different point, but the gain of function overlap, like with the COVID-19 timeframe. These are things that have shown to have cascading effects that they can't foresee and they can't control. Then the question becomes, is that part of the plan? Creating something that becomes out of control to be able to use to, this is where the Stardust solution point. This is about the idea of the insect allies conversation, which is the same self-spreading point, but from an insect perspective. That's all DARPA technology. We've talked about all of this. If you haven't heard and seen any of the stuff that we talked about in the past, that might sound crazy to you. These are all documented government programs. Just look up insect allies. In fact, here, just to make the point for those that haven't heard of any of that, because I believe this is a independent article. Military plan to spread viruses using insects could create new class of biological weapon, scientists warn. And I think we did right here, the article on it. Scientists accuse DARPA of genetically modifying insects for bioweapons, spread agricultural viruses. And here is a video that I feel is, why not, seeing as how it's relevant to the larger point. Now, coming back, we're talking about genetic side of this, but there is an overlap to this and how these things can, even if you're talking about from mother to offspring, right? Same kind of idea. These things have effects that go forward. This is the overlap with the insect allies that then bled into becoming the self-spreading vaccine conversation. Again, you've seen this clip. This is from 2020. This was 2019, and in the overlap. And I think this was EU, and it was a massive symposium that included the United States government. And they discussed about this.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the word virus has been dominating media headlines as well as our daily lives. Did you know that one approach that has been proposed to control virally transmitted diseases is by releasing a virally transmitted vaccine? Unlike traditional vaccines, infectious vaccines do not require any individual consent. Infectious solutions are also being developed for food and agriculture and are currently making their way through the regulatory approval process. However, do we really want to intentionally disperse these modified viruses outside the lab? Is this a forward march of science or a mistake? Join our live event at the 2020 Euroscience Open.
So it was 2020. But, so again, that's self-spreading. That's, gain of function level, but there's an overlap, guys. And my point is about thinking of something like that. Like you could just make it a different conversation about vaccine technology, that they're in a location where they've created a situation where there's no real accountability. There's no real regulation. They can do whatever they want. CEO run country. They can decide what's in their best interest, and that's probably profit related. And what happens if that ends up becoming something that rolls over to the town next to them, the state next to them? And look, there is a level of understanding here that needs to be like, it's not about, it comes down to things that very well are dangerous or like gain of function that I think world around we acknowledge is something that is almost playing with God. Now that's a bad way to go with it, or playing God, excuse me. A bad direction to go with it because, it overlaps the religious perspective, but I do think it makes sense for people to understand that these are things that I argue we shouldn't even be involved in. And now going back to the genetic side of this, if there's a clip we played a lot, I'll play at the end today, that really does go back to when this first started, when they were starting to clone things and patent life. And I think this is where this is going. And this is kind of the meshing of that into a kind of free-for-all location and building out of this direction to the point to where now we're talking about cloning, I guess, use like bodies they can use for future reference. And at this point, saying back to the point that women would have to be paid to carry these basic clones, I guess, and so then at what point does this overlap? That was the point with the whole Christian point. So doesn't this, from a Christian right perspective, doesn't this feel like a violation? Right? So now you're making, this woman is giving birth to something that you engineer, that you then hack up for pieces that you might need. Pretty sure that doesn't align with most values. Last Monday, the same day it announced itself to the world in Wired, R3 Bio sent Technology Review they sent R3 sent Technology Review a sweeping disavowal of our findings. So they reached out and basically said they called them out for what they were saying. That they doubled down because they have the evidence to prove what's going on. It said Schloendorn, quote, never made any statement regarding hypothetical non-sentient human clones. He literally did. That would be carried by surrogates. The most overarching of these challenges was its insistence that, quote, any allegations of intent or conspiracy to create human clones or humans with brain damage are categorically false. But even Schloendorn and his co-founder, Alice Gilman, can't seem to keep away from the topic. Just last September, the pair presented at Abundance Longevity. The longevity is the word that tends to kind of mask this whole endeavor. Remember that because it's longevity is like, life extension. So it says the pair presented at Abundance Longevity, a $70,000 per ticket event in Boston organized by the anti-aging promoter Peter Diamandis. Although the presentation to about 40 people was not recorded and was meant to be confidential, they were under the mind that this was not something people saw. A copy of the agenda for the event shows that Schloendorn was there to outline his, quote, final bid to defeat aging in a session called, quote, full body replacement. According to a person who was there, both animal research and personal clones for spare organs were discussed. During the presentation, Gilman and Schloendorn were even stood in front of an image of a cloning needle. Pressed on whether this was a talk about brainless clones, Gilman told us that while R3's current business is replacing animal models, quote, the team reserves the right to hold hypothetical futuristic discussions. So essentially admitting that, yeah, we were, but we didn't want to admit it when you asked us the first time. MIT Technology Review found no evidence that R3 has cloned anyone or even animals bigger than a rodent. What we did find were documents, additional meeting agendas, and other sources outlining a technical roadmap for what R3 called body replacement cloning in a 2023 letter to supporters. So here's what I get from this, which we'll get into more in this article. I believe we're dealing with a pay-per-view or a paid service for billionaires, where this is not something that people know what's going on. Sort of like when Peter Thiel tried to do his Ambrosia thing, which was pumping young blood into billionaires, which I think I even had that to come up. Hold on. Yep, here it is. For those that wouldn't want to believe it, because I know it sounds crazy. The startup harvesting the blood of the young. This was Peter Thiel. It stopped, but I argue it really didn't. Because there's a market for this, which is horrifying to think about, but it does exist. Because and look, there is evidence showing that there's ways you can scientifically use this to in some way better give yourself longer life. So in this case, I believe what we're talking about is an industry that is building and possibly even booming, where you're dealing with this kind of work, whatever they're able to do now, but happening in places where there is no regulation. Like, I feel like a lot of this is being set up to create a circumstance where they can go over to Prospera or Praxia or whatever these new locations are to do all of this stuff for them, for billionaire elitists. And so what we're talking about here is the body replacement cloning letter they sent out in 2023. The timing is interesting to me, especially, and the idea of that they haven't cloned anybody bigger than a rodent, even though they've had this technology for a long time. I just don't find that plausible. It says, though he holds a PhD, Schloendorn is a biotech outsider who has published little and is best known for having once outfitted a do-it-yourself lab in his Bay Area garage. Like that one they closed down that was owned by that Israeli guy. Kind of half kidding. Still, his ties to the experimental fringe of longevity science has earned him a network in Silicon Valley and allies at a risk-taking U.S. health innovation agency known as ARPA-H. Fantastic. So the basically the one that was started before that I think it was Melania Trump just moved the H around so they could pretend like it was their own thing. It was HARPA before, now it's ARPA-H, same thing. And ultimately, Whitney and I talked about this as well. So a government program, literally the U.S. government, Trump's administration, who is involved with this program, which I find pretty hard to believe because of, I would have, let's say, before. But today, it seems like they don't even care what they're showing. They're just bull rushing forward in hopes that we're not paying attention. That's insane to me. So he's still, and on top of that, the point is this is a guy who seems to be regarded in the field or just in scientific fields, which we used to say what that means these days, as sort of a, he's kind of a, what they call what's the word they used? Fringe. Outside the respected circles. And the point is that I think we have so many billionaire elements that are so over focused on making sure they can live forever. This is a science field that they're dumping so much money into. So this guy's in his garage literally becomes this major ARPA age-connected billionaire funded program. Together with his success at raising money for his investors, this signals that the brainless clone concept should be taken seriously by a wider community of scientists, doctors, and ethicists, some of whom express grave concerns, or at the very least, that they're going to try desperately or otherwise, no matter what anybody else says. And so U.S. government involved, Silicon Valley, high-level people, all of which ties directly back to the U.S. government core today. It sounds crazy, in my opinion, said Jose Sibeli, researcher at Michigan State University. Says, he describing the whole thing to him, the brainless clone idea. He said, how do you demonstrate safety, right? What is safety when you're trying to create an abnormal human? And again, the question of morality, of religion comes into play for people that, that matters for. 25 years ago, Sibeli was among the first scientists to try to clone human embryos. 25 years ago. But he was trying to obtain matched stem cells, not make a baby. Quote, there is no limit to human imagination and ways to make money, but there have to be boundaries, he says. And this is the boundary of making a human being who is not a human being, right? It's a creepy thing to think about. And I'm of the mind this is happening. Feasibility research. Since Dolly the sheep was born, and I've referenced this many times over the years, in 1996, born, a clone. Researchers have cloned dogs, cats, camels, horses, cattle, ferrets, and other species of mammal. How come we haven't heard of that? I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but I'm willing to bet you ask anybody. Most people probably heard of that sheep they talked about. But why did we, and I always say that, and then we heard no more about it. Horses, cattle, ferrets, species, where is all this? Is it only one example? Or are we talking about herds and cattle and herds of these things? I don't know. I find it pretty damn alarming that this is something in 1996 they claim they did. Claim is fair enough to say. And that we just never talked about it again? Not really in any main conversation? Doesn't that in and of itself almost tell you something's going on there? Should anyway make you consider that? That's just alarming to me. 1996. Those grave risks are why we've never heard of a human clone, because they go on to say that there's all these issues of, the defects, stillbirths. And that's why, we never heard of a human clone. I find it interesting the way they frame that, even though it's theoretically possible to create one. Are we really going to tell ourselves that they have had the ability, but no one's done it? Does anybody believe that with what we know about the world? I don't. But brainless clones flip the script. That's because the ultimate aim is to create not a healthy person, but an unconscious body that would probably need life support. Okay, feeding, like a feeding tube to stay alive, because this body would share the DNA of a person being copied. Its organs would be a near perfect immunological match. Okay, well, here's an interesting point to overlap with. Kind of also showing you the manipulation of the political things they tell you. What are we hearing from people today? Well, we're talking about the idea. Well, actually, what's interesting now, another thought to it. You get Elon Musk telling you we're having a shortage. We need more kids. Okay. Well, a lot of people forever have been telling us that we're overpopulated. I believe that was also very clear manipulation. But you can go back and look at the population bomb and how many years they kept moving that out. It's like climate change, same thing. There's levels of truth to all these things, but there's a manipulation within both. The point here is that what you're saying is we could in the future create clones for this. Well, wouldn't that create like a doubling of society, or at least a doubling of the people who could afford it, which would then require life support and resources for people that are just, it seems like an almost guaranteed infeasible scenario. And it says, because the body would share the DNA, perfect match, backers of this broad concept argued that a non-sentient body would be ethically acceptable to harvest organs from. Ethically acceptable to who exactly? To whom? Yeah, I mean, from a religious perspective, it doesn't change anything just because they're non-sentient. I mean, maybe it does, and people can have their own opinions. But I think, or maybe you look at it like they're not even human because it wasn't created by God. It's just it's a very, very unnerving reality that I believe we're already in. It says some also believe that swapping in fresh, young body parts, known as replacement, is the likeliest path to life extension, since so far no drug can reverse aging. So we're told. In this case, harvesting organs. So what's going to get into is a weird overlap to this about whether these things would even technically be non-sentient in a legal sense or in a biological sense. And it says, and there's the idea of a complete body transplant. Quote, certainly for the cryonics patients, that sounds like something really promising. It says, prominent Swedish transhumanist and expert in the ethics of future technologies. He notes that many people who opt to be stored in cryonic chambers after death choose the less expensive option of head only. So there might be a market for having an extra cloned body. Because there is a market for real wealthy people to have their bodies frozen or possibly just their heads, showing you that they all believe this is something coming. MIT Technology Review first approached Schlendorn 2 years ago after learning he'd led a confidential online seminar called the Body Replacement Mini Conference. And over here, pushing back on whether he's even talking about this, that makes you sense that they know there's something off about this, in which he presented recent lab progress towards making replacement bodies. That's a quote. According to a copy of the agenda, in that 2023 session also included a presentation of a cloning expert, Young Gai Sheng, and there was another from Jean Hebert, who was then a professor at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and is now a program manager at ARPA-H. One thing I want you to really see is this alarming kind of incestuous overlap between this very field and our government. And then, interestingly, the very technocratic side of it that applies just to the larger transition that is just immersed in this current administration, where he oversees in ARPA-H a project to use stem cells to restore damaged brain tissue. Hebert popularized the so-called replacement solution to avoiding death in a 2020 book called Replacing Aging. R3 now appears on the ARPA-H website on a list of prospective partners for his program. R3 bio, making what we're talking about, is on the U.S. government ARPA-H website. Just to really make it clear. Now it says, quote, there are a lot of variations on this where they're trying to find a socially acceptable form, says George Church, a Harvard University professor who advises startups in this field. But Church says gestating an entire body is probably taking things too far, especially since nearly all patients on transplant lists are waiting for just a single organ, like a heart or a kidney. There's almost no scenario where you need a whole body. Worth pointing out, by the way, that who we're talking about there is George Church, who is mentioned in, there's overlapping connections to funding and work that Epstein was doing at Harvard. George Church is a pretty prominent person at Harvard. It says, even so, replacement technology has found a fervent base of support among a group of self-described hardcore longevity adherents who follow a philosophy called vitalism. Now, that's actually something I should have saved on the tags. Vitalism is a newer one to me. These terms evolved to kind of hide the real point. Vitalism, I mean, this is life extension, So vitalism is, I guess, the name for the more hardcore longevity life extension or adherence, which holds that society should redirect resources entirely from everything we care about. Well, I read it as redirects resources to me says, redirect them from what's currently happening, redirect them toward achieving unlimited lifespans. And of course, think about this. I've said this is what anybody that I've read on this topic that talks about this from a point of insight, like they're scientists, for example, or involved with the kind of projects, or will tell you that, if this comes to pass, it's going to be very clearly, it's not going to be free for all. Everybody can live forever. Hooray. That's not what's going to happen. Or even if it's extension, because one, it's going to cause a very clear issue for the government because that's all they care about. But on top of that, the point is that it's going to be wealthy people. It's not going to be something handed out to everybody. So what you'll get is wealthy people, influential people will live a lot longer than people who are not. And then what you get, rules forever. Like Trump is literally building his emperor for life, new global order, probably because he wants to live forever and guide it. You think I'm joking? I think these people genuinely, this is connected to his current administration. I'm to a degree, kind of being facetious. That's a thought that just came to my mind. I was not like mapping this out, but that does make sense to me. I think that these people are very much in this mindset. And it says vitalism, which holds society should redirect all of its resources to unlimited lifespans. The growing influence of this movement achieved through lobbying, investment, recruiting, and public messaging was detailed earlier this year in MIT Technology Review. One vitalist group, the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, creepy. They see themselves, that many of these groups, I'm not going to speak for the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, but there is a weird overlap to like a religious perspective in this, where they see themselves in a lot of ways becoming gods or becoming the new like prophet class of the technocratic world. This is why we're talking about this stuff. One day, looking back, hopefully once we're beyond this, people will see more clearly why we were so adamant about where this was going. Or even before me, look at David Icke or James Corbett or people that have been telling you what was going on. Catherine Austin Fitts. Hopefully it's not looking back from within this problem going, gee, we tried to tell you. I hope not. But this is my point, though, is that there is this overlap. And if you understand what they're saying, I mean, people that are like in the Curtis Yarvin inner circle kind of stuff are very much of the mind that they're like some kind of prophet class of this new age. Now, where we get to end this, when we get to in a second, is exactly what I'm worried about, written by people involved, telling you we're transitioning society right now. Just hoping people can pay attention. Hoping that somebody out there who can maybe actually get something to go viral in this broken, engineered, algorithmically controlled world, get it in front of Tucker. Maybe he'll talk about it. Maybe we'll actually see it and solve the problem. But because people like us are not allowed to have these conversations beyond people that already see them, I doubt that will happen. But you know as well as I that if this conversation right now was on Fox News, it would be everywhere in the world. You know as well as I, it would be every mainstream alternative would talk about it. Tucker would have a show on. They'd have interviews about it, and maybe we could stop it. Or maybe not. But sure wish this was an organic field where that could happen anyway, right? Anyway, they reckon that a proof of concept human clone lacking a neurocortex would cost $40 million to create. A tiny amount, relatively speaking. Of course, they would say that. $40 million being like, whatever, just that's, so idea being that at least in the beginning, that's something that's wildly outpriced to anybody other than wealthy people. Its report cited the existence of two stealth companies working on cloning whole non-sentient bodies right now. At least, and again, this goes back to 2023 if you understand what they're talking about. And it says, although it took care not to name them, why not? If these companies' activities became public, quote, there will be a huge backlash. People will hate it, the entrepreneur Chris Bohrer said while presenting the roadmap at a French resort last August. So look, okay, isn't there, how do you even take that? So these inner circle billionaires are very aware that most people would be outraged by this, but they're quietly, secretly doing it, in many cases with your overlapping tax dollars alongside it, public-private partnerships and all? Yes. I mean, look, guys, that's my point about what's going on in this administration. There's tons of money flying out into the hands of Palantir and Peter Thiel. These are people who are guiding this movement. As we talk, we'll point out again in a second. When Jim O'Neill joined RFK's right-hand man, people like Peter Thiel, in this article they've arrested, Mark Andreessen, they were super excited because O'Neill is a transhumanist. He speaks at events about this stuff. This is in the core circle of this current administration. So they took care not to mention this because, if people heard about it, they'd be outraged. Quote, there are a ton of dystopian movies and novels about this kind of stuff. Yeah, I wonder why. That is why I don't talk about any of the companies working on it. They're trying to hide from public attention. Yeah, that sure makes you feel better about it. So not only are they hiding from public attention, they're going in places where they can do this stuff without regulation because that makes it feel better. You just wouldn't understand. People who know Schloendorn describe a dynamo-like presence who is 100% dedicated to the goal of extreme life extension. Extreme life extension. He's also well connected. In an interview, Aubrey de Grey, the influential and controversial fundraiser and prognosticator who co-founded SENS, called Schloendorn, one of my proteges. And around 2010, Peter Thiel reportedly invested $1.5 million in ImmunePath, a company started by Schloendorn to develop stem cell treatments, though it soon failed. The point is, though, there's always been an overlapping connection there with the interest, with the agenda, with the ideology and funding. A representative for Peter Thiel did not respond to a request to confirm the figure. Now, remember, my point is that it's always been happening, but right now, especially today, because of how much they know we're paying attention, this stuff has gone largely dark. There's a lot of money flying around that these days that they're just going through channels to make sure it's very difficult to see. By 2021, Schloendorn had moved on, founding R3 Biotechnologies. In 2023, letter to stakeholders signed by Schloendorn begins by saying, quote, that body replacement cloning will require multi-component genetic engineering on a scale that has never been attempted in primates. 2023. So you could argue that they, my point, they went from there, which is what this entire article is stressing. And remember how it started, where they were trying to kind of gaslight and deny they were even going in this direction, even though you could prove that. And it says, would it work? Well, there's one way to find out, the letter says. Wang, the investor at Immortal Dragons, says he put money into R3 after it showed him it is possible to create mice without complete brains. Quote, there were imperfections, but the resulting mice survived, grew up, and to me, that's a pretty strong experiment. He says it was evidence enough for him to fund R3's attempt to, quote, replicate results in primates. Remember Immortal Dragons? That's an important point of this. The R3 document refers to a birthing fix it developed to further improve the cloning success rate. Well, so at this point, are there just a bunch of deformed clones wandering around? Are they killing these things after the fact? This whole thing seems wrong to me. While MIT Technology Review didn't learn what R3's process entails, we found a reference to it on a LinkedIn page of Maitreyi Mathana, a scientist who co-signed the 2023 letter to R3 stakeholders and is a former research assistant to Hebert. We were unable to reach Mahanta, excuse me. Now here is one we're going to read in a second that I think is important from LinkedIn. It says, like several other people interviewed for this article, DeGray made a resourceful effort to avoid directly confirming the existence of R3 when we spoke. Seems weird, doesn't it? While at the same time freely discussing theoretical aspects of body cloning technology. For instance, he talked about ways to shorten the wait for your double to grow up to suitable size for organ harvesting. A further genetic mutation could be added to cause, quote, central precocious puberty in the clone, he said. This condition causes a growth spurt, even pubic hair in a toddler. I mean, there's no way. I mean, if you don't feel uncomfortable about what this is showing, then I question where your mind is at. I mean, here's what's crazy to me, especially since we're talking about the very same people who are all about everything the Republican team is pushing right now. For example, the trans conversation. Not the same thing, mind you, but we're talking about human growth elements that are, what you're altering this weird. I don't even want to get into it. This is just insanely disgusting to me. It makes my skin crawl. Cloning dictators is the last category, it says, and it says who would clone a body and pay to keep it alive for years until it's needed. Well, the first customers for this costly technology, if it ever proves feasible, would likely be the ultra-rich and ultra-powerful. And the last, most likely. Do you really believe they're going to allow themselves to basically potentially live longer, if not forever, and then just let everybody else gain that power? Guys, that is a power to rule forever. Or at the very least, rule, seeing as how you live longer than everybody. You'll gain more knowledge, you'll gain more influence and money. That's what these people covet. And again, this is not some hypothetical, guys. This is technology in review. MIT recently covered this. This is really what they're doing. And the point is that this will not be handed down to the average people unless it's some kind of like moderated, smaller version to give you some. It's just, this is not the way this will work and never has. As John Rappaport will tell you, there's a 1,000 different patents they have in many ways that they utilize that they just never allow the human species to engage with. Biotechnology is continuously developing, it writes. Human organs can be continuously transplanted. The longer you live, the younger you become. And you can even achieve immortality, said Putin, apparently through an interpreter in a recent conversation with Xi. Of course, the article's trying to insinuate that they're the dictators, right? Like they're like somehow, weirdly enough, because China, Russia, then dictator, even though what our governments are doing, somehow democracy. That's just so sad where we are in the world, that we all collectively, like the mainstream just can't get past this childish view that somehow because they just say the right words, that they're not murdering children all over the world. But, and look, in my mind, all of these governments are illegitimate. All of these governments are dictators. But it's just funny to me that that's how they frame it. Anyway, some predict that in this century, humans will live to 150 years. Xi responded from China. There are companies working on this, it writes. They are in the stealth. We can't reveal too much about them. But the general concept on this is, if you didn't have any ethical qualms, you could do most of it today, says Will Harborn, Chief Investment Officer of Long Game Advisors, basically saying they have the ability to do it right now. And this was last year. So again, I argue, do you really believe that the people we're talking about, if not just the world we live in, that this somebody somewhere would not have tried? You can decide for yourself. If we were the dictator of some country and wanted to clone yourself, like the US and Israel right now, you would already go grow one. You can create a cloned embryo of yourself. You can get a surrogate to carry out the term. You can grow a body until age 18 with a brain. And eventually, if you were a dictator, you could kill them and try to transplant your head on their body. Just casual conversation on this podcast. Good times. In order to make the body, and remember, this is the guy involved with the program, guys. This is Will Harborn, and Chief Investment Officer of Long Game Advisors. It says, in order to make the body replacement process ethical, the clone's brains need to be stunted so it lacks consciousness. Okay. Well, you tell me. So you have a body born from a woman, apparently that's how it's going to start, who they just engineered, manipulated into not having a consciousness, I guess. How in the world, by the way, you could ever truly verify that? Okay. So whether you're religious or not, do you find that to be acceptable? Right? That you can have this human body born of a woman. It's like any other thing in the environment with crops that they just tweak in a lab. Does that then make it no longer a seed? Does that make it no longer a plant? And suddenly this is just not a human because we say so, and we can just chop it up and take pieces from it or do whatever we want to it. Okay? There's just something evil about this. My personal opinion. It says, of course, the most extreme version of the replacement dream isn't just to take organs. It's to take over the body entirely. Oh, okay. Well, then what happens? Okay, Elon Musk and all the rest who are all Christian right and all using all of these things to make you think they care about what you care about. He's adamant about this. So is Peter Thiel telling you as a libertarian Christian. Guys, they don't care about any of this stuff. Peter Thiel could barely bring himself to say the human race should continue. Guys, what we're talking about here is when you then hypothetically put your brain into a new body, your consciousness into a new concept, are you then still who you are? Does your soul remain? I mean, all these questions about whether religious or not are things that people want. I mean, the idea is what then happens? And again, my point is in a broad sense, but speaking for people that seem to be largely supporting the people driving this agenda, doesn't that contradict what you believe? Think about that. They told me, and also think about how in any side of this, left or right, that these billionaire elitists will tell the group in front of them whatever they need to hear to believe that they're on your side. Elon Musk does it every other year, it seems. He just reinvents it. The same thing with any of these people, guys. They just constantly feed you. I mean, Trump's done it numerous times. Seems like he's doing it again right now. They told me they were looking at a head transplant on a 2 or 3-year-old, he says. I stopped short. How could you even conceive of that? The biomechanical capability is not there. You have to wait until at least 14 years old, and I would say 16. It was very clear to me, he says, that these guys were not surgeons. They're biologists. Just let that sink in for a second. Sergio Canavero, a controversial Italian surgeon who has proposed head and brain transplants. They told me they were looking at a head transplant on a 2 or 3-year-old. And he simply said, it's clear to me these are not surgeons. These are biologists. This is Nazi-level experimentation, guys. Now, I want to reiterate that this is on MIT Technology Review. It was recently on Wired, was the other article before this. Now, whatever you think about the platform, this is not some fringe conspiracy theory platform. or whatever you want to call it. It's just as likely to be wrong as anything else. But I really want to stress how alarming this is. So what does this mean? Are we talking about a clone grown without consciousness? And how do we know that? And that you're now chopping off another thing to put on this 3-year-old cloned body? Or are you telling us that you're trying to do this to a living 3-year-old that maybe is dying? Or I don't know, guys. Or maybe you already did. This, you know how uncomfortable this is? This is where this is pushing us into. And this is something that should be discussed before we just jump into this. Now remember this part, because it matters to me. If this was hypothetically happening, where do you think that would possibly be able to go on? Even in you know, like people like China, for example, anywhere else where the U.S. we perceive it as probably going on. It's not. It's just China, Iran, Russia. There's very similar, at least feigned, just like in the U.S., restrictions. What I think is you're talking about places in the world that are unregulated. And ask yourself whether or not this, as we just showed you, being possible since 2023 is already happening. And this guy's literally telling you, he's speaking to them, and they said they were looking at a head transplant of a 2 or 3-year-old. But if you want to use a clone, it says it must be a non-sentient clone, otherwise it's murder or homicide. Well, that's a pretty interesting distinction. So you can just tweak this here, genetically alter that. Suddenly they're just not human anymore, at least not sentient. Well, okay, if they're not sentient, they're still human though, right? So now why wouldn't it be murder, right? I mean, there's just this ethical black hole. Then at what point do you then overlap this with some other conversation that justifies them killing all sorts of things or taking organs from people? I mean, overlap that with Israel's practice of stealing organs from Palestinians. I mean, there's a market here that this suddenly opens up. Now, keeping this in mind, and I'm sure we'll come back to this, Immortal Dragons backs Unlimited Bio. So there was 3 main investors. Immortal Dragon seems to be the primary one as far as the article was framing. Immortal Dragons, October 22nd, 2025, a $40 million longevity fund announced its strategic investment in Unlimited Bio, a biotechnology company developing combinational therapies to address the multi-system nature of aging. As it says, Unlimited Bio's platform integrates gene therapies, biologics, plasma-based interventions, cell therapies, and small molecular programs targeting complementary mechanisms across organ systems. Aging is not a single pathway, but a multi-system failure involving independent biological networks. It says extending functional lifespan of both natural and engineered tissues. Creepy. So, you know, now you're getting what if it's all engineered tissue? What if it's a clone? Extending the lifespan of clone. You know, it just becomes, it blurs the line between what is and is not human or sentient. Further clinical validation will proceed through special economic zones, specifically Prospera, utilizing surrogate endpoints in healthy volunteers to enable cost-efficient trials meeting high safety standards. Oh, so they told us. So the CEO-run company tells us with no real accountability or oversight. Fantastic. So in case you're confused, what they're saying is that the clinical validation that we were just talking about, at least from their perspective and what they're involved in, will be done from Prospera, utilizing surrogate endpoints in healthy volunteers. So if you're talking about a woman bringing to fruition some weird clone body that they can use, well, that's what they're talking about. And it says, looking ahead, Unlimited Bio's near-term priority in the first in-human clinical study combining 2 gene therapies in healthy participants, gene therapies, planned for late 2025 to early 2026. Hey, we're right in the midst. Pending regulatory and ethical approvals, which don't seem to exist on Prospera. The study is described as the first clinical evaluation of a dual gene therapy combination in healthy individuals and is aimed to serve as a proof of concept demonstrating the safety and synergistic rejuvenative potential of multi-gene interventions. So the real point is to understand that their clinical validations are taking place inside of this unregulated, unsupervised Prospera ZD. I think that matters. And again, let's not forget that in this current administration, which I'm about to show you is immersed in that agenda, we have the reality of Jim O'Neill, who is RFK's right-hand man and is an adamant transhumanist longevity expert. And if you read into this, as it'll tell you, although much less of a public figure, O'Neill is quite well known for his increasingly well-funded and tight-knit longevity community. His acquaintances include the prominent longevity influencer, Brian Johnson, who we've discussed, who describes him as a soft-spoken, thoughtful, methodical guy, and, of course, the billionaire entrepreneur, Peter Thiel, who, again, many articles discussed how excited they were that he was going to be in the administration. Now, we also talked about the fact that this was the same conversation. This was the one about Jim O'Neill, but they were building a freedom city in Gaza, which is relevant for what we're going to show you to wrap up here. What we were just highlighting is just the concerning research happening on that field. And then I overlap that with the concern that in many cases, I believe it's taking place in areas that are deliberately created so there's no one paying attention. And they used the idea of libertarianism to trick people into thinking that's what they are fighting for. You're being played. I'm telling you, if you're out there thinking in any way this represents what we're fighting for, you're being played by billionaires who want you to think that's what they're fighting for. I hope I'm wrong. In this case, Gaza freedom cities being supported by the very people who fought harder than anybody to stop freedom cities, to stop smart cities, which are the same thing in every possible way. Talking about the tokenization, the digital money, the surveillance, everything about this is identical. And now it doesn't matter because it's in Gaza, apparently. Well, it gets worse than that, guys. So first, I'll include the network state conversation, because that's where this overlaps to. And I think what we're talking about in a separate conversation is this Great Reset overlap. This is part of the same conversation. I believe this is the same conversation. And this is about reimagining, redesigning, building back better the system of governance to what we just heard. Or rather, just the world in which that's the style of governance and that kind of stuff could happen. So this is a conversation I had about this, literally what they call tech Zionism, by the way. Srini Vasan, the former CTO of Coinbase, who wrote a book about this, and many others used the exact term, calling this tech Zionism. Freedom cities, charter cities, network state, same conversation. Also, this one about specifically Prospera, which is the first one that caught my eye. The technocratic regime change, under the guise of freedom, technocrats are slowly taking control. So what's important to overlap with all of this, this appears to be the first example I can see of an attempt, or rather, maybe not the attempt, but the current example of the attempt to start the first freedom city in the United States, which I hope I've made clear. Which actually, I should do this first. Let me come back to this. Actually, that's why I had that. I realized I organized this wrong. We'll come back to this. So this is polls show support for transporting Bell Island into a global special economic zone. This is the same point, guys, connected to the same people. This is about the idea of the network state agenda. But here's the important parts of this. 2025, startup groups, or startup city, another phrase for the same thing, startup city groups say they're meeting Trump officials to push for deregulated freedom cities. Very important. So this was 2025 in March. March 11th, 2025, tech execs are pushing Trump to build freedom cities run by corporations. Says a new lobbying group dubbed the Freedom Cities Coalition. And remember this because this ties right back around into Prospera, Peter Thiel. And I mean, it's a perfect circle. You can't miss how all these things are the same conversation. Still don't think everyone's grasping that. The new lobbying group, dubbed the Freedom Cities Coalition, wants to convince President Trump and Congress to authorize the creation of new special development zones within the United States. Many of them revolve around sort of using parks and other, government-controlled areas. But what I believe is it's going to be stuff like this, where it's sort of like a recapturing of certain locations. But it says the Freedom City Coalition is a project of Niue Capital, also important, a company that has been centrally involved in the development of Prospera. So right there is an obvious connection to the idea of what they want to do in this location, right? The Freedom City effort, which Peter Thiel is supporting of, Pronomos Capital involved with for this country, which is the same conversation of Prospera where they're doing those experiments. Continuing, it says Prospera is also part of something called the Network State Movement. Wired reports on the efforts of the Freedom Cities Coalition to encourage President Trump and Congress to enshrine their project into federal law. Currently, they're still trying to do this. And it says Trey Goff, the chief of staff of the startup nation known as Prospera, tells Wired that he and other Prospera representatives working under an advocacy group called the Freedom Cities Coalition have been meeting with the Trump administration about the idea in recent weeks. He claims the administration has been very receptive. Now, I believe he was very adamant about it. People just there wasn't a lot of response. People pushed back. And you have to essentially seize territory. And there was also a lot of other things he was dealing with. But I believe this has been slowly building. March 12th, the next day. What are freedom cities? Billionaire CEOs plan could reshape America. A coalition of campaign groups opposed to regulation has called for the creation of, quote, freedom cities across the United States. And the idea is backed by some of the most high-profile billionaires, including Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen. And it still keeps going. We haven't even connected the full circle yet. But the point is to realize how this is all the same thing. It's a global effort. Over here it's called one thing. Over here it's called something else. But it is the same push. And it says the Freedom Cities Coalition, a think tank pushing for the creation of unregulated areas in every state in the United States, says that it had informed the White House about the use of interstate compacts to create the cities. Another organization pushing for the concept is Prospera, which is supported by Pronomos Capital, the group we've covered pretty extensively, which is very clearly the funding mechanism through Thiel and everybody else. In regard to the focal point of this, I argue there's more than just them. A venture capital firm, which is in turn backed by Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen. Thiel already has close ties with Donald Trump administration and has supported Vance, J.D. Vance, basically why he exists, a political career since he ran for Senate in Ohio. So Pronomos Capital, this is an important show, I argue, and the rapid transition to a techno-feudal state is about the funding mechanism that seems to be leading. And we get into all praxia. Like every major example of this in the world seems to tie back to them and people they work with. So in this case, this article was March 12th. April 10th, 2025, next month. Freedom cities push on public lands gains visibility under Donald Trump. So here, March 25th, same month really, or same end of 2025. So my point was simply to show you the overlap and connection between all the different agendas and how those people were coordinating financially and every other way to push Trump to make this happen in this country. Now, before we read this last article, coming back to this point, March 26th, 2026. Belle Island Freedom City. What they're claiming is that there's a majority of support. That's hard to say these days. Whether you could, I can't take any poll at face value ever. Consider it. Maybe they want it. I'd argue if they want it, they're being misled about what it means for them, in my opinion. But they want this island to be turned into a freedom city in Detroit. Transform the 982-acre island in the Detroit River between Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario, Canada, into a special economic zone. In order for the special economic zone to be created, it would require passing of legislation by the United States Congress, the state of Michigan, and the city of Detroit, which I doubt they'll do that. I'll probably just force it in. But reality being is once you pass legislation, will you open this door? And I think that's what they're pushing for. So simple point is they're trying to do this. You can find very clearly that the very group, Charter Cities, Rodney Lockwood sat down with Charter Cities podcast, which is the point is that there's a clear connection between Prospera and the agenda. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily the same exact group. From what I can see, it's the very same political agenda, and that they sat down and discussed what they were trying to accomplish, and it's all the same kind of point. It's not necessarily, in my mind, whether we're talking about every point of control, but more so about the transition of the way things are governed. And so, sure, from their perspective, if they can get this to start happening everywhere, it simply opens the door for this governance to shift. And I think that's what this is. That's why they sat down with this podcast directly connected with Prospera and had an entire conversation about why Belle Island would lead to the same agenda. Watch it, listen to it for yourself. And I think what it leads to is exactly what I'm worried about. Now, let me make this point even more clear. 2025, the rise of freedom cities. This is posted by Robert Mugga. And this is somebody immersed in the same conversation. This is a person who's adamant about this agenda and very clearly sees the same thing I do. But this is about promoting this agenda. And here, this is where was it again? Let me do this just in case I lose my highlighting. I was just going to go to his profile. founder, entrepreneur, advisor to governments, companies, and international agencies, keynote speaker. Where was the senior consultant for the World Bank? Just wanted to show you that this is an influential person in the sense of, the global technocracy. Technical specialist, faculty. Any sense? Okay, so the point, and I find this very interesting. The rise of freedom cities. There's a lot in it you should read, but I want to cut to the chase. It says, Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist behind California Forever, which is originally what drove me to this, which was another effort, by the way, right around the same time frame of when this push was starting about this technology. Andreessen was pushing to create a freedom city, a special autonomous zone, all the same words you want to use for it, called California Forever. And he offered to, Mark Andreessen was behind California Forever, has offered a more grounded vision. In 2023, Andreessen announced plans to build a new city in Solano County, funded by a consortium of Silicon Valley investors. It is the same agenda, guys. They've been trying it everywhere they can. California Forever reflects the same techno-libertarian ambition. It's not libertarian. That's just the name they gave it to try to glom on. It's the same thing they did with Bitcoin and everything else. They're trying to glom on to what they think you like, but as freedom cities. Here's what he writes. Needless to say, freedom cities come with significant risks. Breathless promises of streamlined governance could just as easily lead to weakened quality controls, regulatory oversight, labor protections, and increased social stratification, as has been the case with so many smart cities, because it's the same conversation. There are also political risks. If freedom cities become enclaves for the wealthy and technologically elitist, as some of their supporters fully expect, they could exacerbate social and economic inequality rather than alleviate it. The shift from democratic to corporate governance raises questions about accountability and representation. If cities are run like companies, who holds the executives accountable? Will residents and not corporate backers and shareholders have a say in the rules and regulations that govern our lives? Well, they made that clear already. They just pretend that the screaming jackals around them that cheer on whatever they say represents what everybody wants. I don't think most people even remotely want something that completely reimagines the world we live in a way that you have no, look, let's not pretend like they care about your inherent constitutional rights, but at least it exists. And at least it forces them to pretend they care and acknowledge it. And this point is they're just going to do away with all of it. Just give power to a CEO who can decide your future because that makes sense. Guys, that's literally you've owned nothing and you've never been happier. That is the WEF plan for globalization. It's the same conversation. It says, ultimately, the success or failure of freedom cities in the United States could have global implications. If they thrive, they could provide a template for future techno-enabled urban development, challenging the dominance of the nation state, which I believe is what's on the table right now. Yet, the truth is that Silicon Valley's embrace of charter cities and network states reflects a broader ideological shift. The belief that technology can replace traditional political institutions is gaining traction among America's economic and intellectual elite. Yes. Freedom cities are not just about building new urban centers. They represent a test case for a new political order. That's what I've been trying to stress to people. And I know you guys are getting it that watch this show. I don't even think this is debatable. Now, it may not succeed. I certainly hope it doesn't. But my God, look at the influence. We're talking about Peter Thiel. That's Palantir. We're talking about the influence, the overlap, this global thing that is exploding. And it's not, he's just one person in all of this. Mark Andreessen is wildly powerful and influential. And these are just two people. This is a massive thing that's happening right now. And I believe it is a test case for a new political order. Legitimately, that they're trying to redesign the way this stuff operates, right? Challenging the dominance of the nation state order, which, I don't believe the government situation. I don't support government in general. But that doesn't mean that I want some new form of CEO-run dictatorship. I want personal freedom. So I really do think that's obvious. Now, lastly, just a quick point out the door to overlap this with where this goes technologically speaking, especially with all the weird things we're dealing with. It's also important to recognize that, as he points out in this clip, President Trump takes action to win the 6G race 2025. This is to ensure America's leadership in 6G development. 6G networks will provide the foundation to operate cutting-edge technology of the next decade, including AI, robotics, implantable technologies, and many other advancements. It will also deliver dramatically faster connection speeds, ultra-low latency. So 6G. Rushing into it before we even know what's going on now. Or at least until they admit it, what's going on now. Sort of like fluoride and all the rest of it. As he says, Trump signed the directive to push this forward, 6G, which will enable AI brain chips known as the biological interface system to cortex. This paper-thin brain chip merges with AI. And I've been talking about this direction for quite a long time, right? And I think what we're talking about is the opening this door to the merging of these things. This is a connection to the conversation because of the opening to put your brain in the cloud, like to transition who you, in their minds, what they think you are into some new body, new shell, new location. It's in my mind very much in the same conversation of the way they see the longevity, like more maybe on Elon Musk's side of this, where he's talking about the putting your brain in the cloud kind of a thing. But I very much think this is where it leads, guys. And I'll overlap that, by the way, with this conversation from yesterday. The idea of what they're siphoning from you and tracking you and monitoring everything. You know, there's something very, very alarming taking place, and whether that's about trying to make sure. I mean, you could very easily find the connections. It worries me. And on top of that, what these things are doing to you. And I'll leave you with Derek's amazing documentary back from 2025, the 5G Trojan Horse. And I believe that this is from before that, actually. He's reposted more than once. I'll also include our conversation from 2020, where Trump was quietly signing 5G law under the cover of the coronavirus conversation, which, by the way, was the episode that got our platform deleted from YouTube. Over 100,000 followers on subscribers on YouTube. And we were only talking about the fact that Trump was signing 5G law where everyone's distracted with COVID, and they shut that down right away. Here is the focused clip of it. Does a newly published study prove the 5G COVID connection? Or no, this was a different one. Either way, the point is all 5G conversations. But now Trump is rolling out the 6G conversation because apparently that's what Americans want. Hashtag winning? I don't think so. Well, I'll leave you with a clip on the way out that I think is important for, where this was always going, guys, and where right now, here's the interesting thing to think about. This was a public conversation, like we said, the sheep in 1996. And at some point, some inner circle decided we shouldn't talk about this anymore. Like this is something that we need to control the awareness of, my opinion. And so now, and when you watch this clip, there was sort of a heyday where it was patenting life and creating, and now suddenly it's like no one's even, at least from the average person's perspective, it's as if it doesn't even exist. And I hope you know that, are as alarmed by that absence of conversation as I am. But be skeptical, don't assume. But with this and everything else we discussed, I think it's pretty clear that we have reason to be concerned. So thank you for tuning in, guys. Thank you for your support. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
The Jacobardi case was one of the great judicial moments in world history, and the public was totally unaware it was actually happening as the process was being engaged. General Electric and Professor Jacobardi went to the patent office with a little microbe that eats up oil spills. They said they had modified this microbe in the laboratory, and therefore it was an invention. The patent office, the U.S. government, took a look at this, quote, invention, and they said, no way. The patent statutes don't cover living things. This is not an invention. Turn down. Then General Electric and Dr. Jacobardi appealed to the U.S. Customs Court of Appeal. And to everyone's surprise, by a 3-2 decision, they overrode the patent office. We bring good things to life. And they said, this microbe looks more like a detergent or a reagent than a horse or a honeybee. I laughed because they didn't understand basic biology. It looked like a chemical to them. Had it had an antenna or eyes or wings or legs, it would never have crossed their table and been patented. Then the patent office appealed. And what the public should realize now is the patent office was very clear that you can't patent life. My organization provided the main amicus curiae brief. If you allow the patent on this microbe, we argued, it means that without any congressional guidance or public discussion, corporations will own the blueprints of life. When they made the decision, we lost by 5-4, and Chief Justice Warren Burger said, sure, some of these are big issues, but we think this is a small decision. 7 years later, the U.S. Patent Office issued a one-sentence decree. You can patent anything in the world that's alive except a full-birth human being. We've all been hearing about the announcement that we have mapped the human genome, but what the public doesn't know is now there's a great race by genomic companies and biotech companies and life science companies to find the treasure in the map. The treasure are the individual genes that make up the blueprint of the human race. Every time they capture a gene and isolate it, these biotech companies claim it as intellectual property. The breast cancer gene, the cystic fibrosis gene, it goes on and on and on. If this goes unchallenged in the world community, within less than 10 years, a handful of global companies will own directly or through license the actual genes that make up the evolution of our species. And they're now beginning to patent the genomes of every other creature on this planet. In the age of biology, the politics is going to sort out between those who believe life first has intrinsic value, and therefore we should choose technologies and commercial venues that honor the intrinsic value. And then we're going to have people who believe, look, life is simply utility. It's commercial fare, and they will line up with the idea to let the marketplace be the ultimate arbiter of all of the age of biology.